Hello and welcome to Sex Part. Today I'm gonna start a new series. What if Deku already knew his future? Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
OF me, Rukido thought to himself as he woke up, moaning. He rubbed his eyes and sat up groggy. He got out of bed, stumbling a little due to some physical discomfort. He slogged out the door and headed for the bathroom, squirming a little. He moved a little step ladder in front of the sink without even thinking. He walked up it, grabbed some toothpaste and a bright toothbrush, and brushed his teeth. After spitting it out and washing it off, he proceeded to cleanse his face. He blinked several times to take in his appearance as he woke up a little. Freckles. Green hair. Izuku Midoriya's eyes blinked a few times in bewilderment before Rukido realized he was Izuku Midoriya. Wait, ah. When a 4-year-old screamed that day, many people thought a new quirk had emerged. Midoriya Apartment, Musutafu, Japan. With a worried glance at her son, Inko said, "Are you sure you're all right, honey?" Probably because he had screamed so loudly. Izuku laughed uneasily and was only able to nod while grinning weakly at her. She let out a little sigh as the 4-year said, Sorry, I thought I saw a villain in the mirror." With a forced smile that he returned, Inko said, "Just sit still for a moment. I'll make you some breakfast." Izuku sighed when she was out of sight and then looked forward, expressionless. In terms of his origin story, he was Rukido Sato, a 32-year-old office worker who watches anime in dub and reads manga. It was a lie to say that being accepted into the My Hero Academy was a typical occurrence for those kinds of origins. Nonetheless, isekai was prevalent in manga and anime. His British friend, who was incapable of getting drunk in the first place, chose to get him intoxicated instead, and that was the last thing he remembered. Apart from that, he didn't know if he had passed away at all. More significantly, why was he Izuku Midoriya of all people if he did die? Hold on, did he murder a child? As he thought that, memories came flooding back. The sight of Katsuki Bakugo's face and the explosion that followed immediately irritated him. Then the day arrived when he went to that quack quirk doctor who was not a villain at all and was informed that he was quirkless. Next came Inko's tears, which were a natural reaction to the reality that this society required a quirk in order to become a hero. That was his life now, what a joke, as Deku, or more famously, Izuku Midoriya. Now, what exactly was he to do? Just carry on as planned? Take on a villain who identifies himself as the Demon Lord, deal with Katsuki's bull, and inherit a quirk that would shatter him? Simply put, trying to lead a normal life would be simpler, right? Even though he was meek, the Izuku in him disagreed. As Rukido considered it, he was only able to shift. He was obviously alone here, and it was obvious that he had merged with Izuku. He still had his dream, though, and he was strangely able to share it. Depending on the company, being an officer worker wasn't the worst, but he has the chance of a lifetime to enjoy it. In addition, he already enjoyed helping others. He would just be acting as a superhero. Izuku snapped out of his inner monologue and smiled brightly at his mother, asking, "Izuku, honey? You've been staring at your breakfast for a little long?" Izuku's statement, "Sorry mommy, I was just thinking about being a hero," startled Inko. Anyone could see that Inko was devastated and had detested herself for her feelings regarding Izuku's dream when she said, Izuku, I am sorry for how I acted the other night." She had fallen into a deep depression as a result of it, which needed to be avoided. Izuku gave her a positive smile and said, "It's okay, mommy. I just need to practice being a hero even more. If I'm gonna be a hero like All Might, then I just have to keep getting big and strong." Inko tried to say, "I know, but Izuku without a quirk," but her eyes began to well up again. Izuku's abrupt statement, "It doesn't matter if I have one or not," caused her to gasp. A spark was visible in his eyes, and despite his fierce gaze, he was still smiling. Compared to the dead eyes she was given the previous evening, it was a huge improvement. "I'll be a hero so I can help as many people as I can. So that's what I'll train for, that's that." Izuku. He appeared to her so different from normal. So much unadulterated will and energy that is just waiting to explode. He wasn't as he had been in the previous days. I. She was unable to say it, though, not just yet. Izuku abruptly gave her a hug after saying, "Don't worry. I'll show everyone I can be a great hero, even better than All Might." Then he looked up at her with the most radiant smile on his face. "But mommy will always be an even better hero than All Might." Crucial shot. Izuku. Inko had grabbed him by the glomp and embraced him firmly as she started crying. Izuku clung to her and laughed aloud, realizing that she was crying with joy. primarily out of concern that they might be caught in the well-known Midoriya flood. Later, Izuku, Rukido, Midoriya gazed at his computer, conducting a vigorous historical research. He had already wagered that this world would be different from the norm. After all, he had been reborn as Izuku Midoriya. He was aware of the manga's general conclusion, and he would be damned if he thought it would be the same. He was correct. When you applied logic, the statement, UA is a university neat, actually made sense. MHA had always brought up those kinds of issues, even though you shouldn't when it comes to anime and superheroes. Let's see. Yup, society is still messed up. Such inquiries concerning MHA typically center on its society and its more than dubious condition. The society of MHA had been messed up for years by 200 years of quirks. You would think that their world would be looking like the future with all those powers coming to pass. Rather, he was 87% certain that the vehicles outside were still from the early days of quirks. There have been no significant advances for humanity, which means they have been holding themselves back for a long time without realizing it. The hero society as a whole was doomed the moment it turned into commercialized bullshit, with more heroes prioritizing money and status over their actual work. These days, it was only small-time criminals with peculiarities who were viewed as villains because the hero who caught them gained more notoriety and attention. Blah. The mere thought of this place made him ill. In any case, he was peaceful, in the fictitious sense. But when groups like All for One made the decision to relocate, Japan simply collapsed, and the other nations were paralyzed with uncertainty about what to do. Which required depending on the high school pupils to finish the task. Heroes who were useless. Was that simply poor writing? When you're in the real world, it's not an excuse. Oh, that was a crazy thing to say, but damn if it didn't sound worth it. If I'm gonna do this hero thing, then I might as well try and change society too while I'm at it. If they ever crossed paths again, All Might would have been helpful because he was already a good hero. Blah. Neither he nor the entire society are concerned about that right now. For the time being, he was Izuku Midoriya, age 4, in kindergarten, and quirkless. He had to deal with Katsuki Bakugo as a friend. Izuku, Rukido, Midoriya was going to enter this world with a bang. Well, this is going to be fun. Not just with his fist, either. Hoth Kindergarten, Classroom. Musutafu, Japan, next day. Have you heard of it? Worthless Deku as Quirkus? Why bother saying all of that? They all mean the same thing in the end. You're right. Guess we can keep calling Deku. I heard him muttering again too, about being a hero still. Seriously? He's an even bigger loser than I thought? Katsuki listened to his group members taunt Izuku while they sat at the table. When he heard that hero remark, he turned to give the quirkless boy a stern look. Similar to the previous day, he was sequestered from the other students with his nose buried in a notebook and occasionally muttering to himself. But there was a change in the expression in his eye. Ordinarily, his face would be bright and silly. He ought to have been dejected and saddened upon learning of his quirklessness. But this Izuku's eyes appeared much more focused than usual, and they were also more animated than usual. And it infuriated him. Izuku, meanwhile, was unaffected by the taunts and insults directed at him. He also didn't miss the scowl that Katsuki Bakugo gave him. Katsuki Bakugo was definitely not someone he liked. In general, he was hot-headed, a bully, and he believed he was superior to everyone. And he would have used his quirk on you specifically to make sure you understood your place if you had shown him any disobedience. He particularly loved the quote, "If you want a quirk so bad, then take a swan dive off the roof and pray you get one in your next life." Izuku's confidence had been forced to a standstill for 10 years due to torment like that. Izuku had devolved into a terrified, easily frightened boy by the age of 14, who would give in to the most unfavorable remarks and clutch at the smallest compliment, or really anything good. Rukido could hardly comprehend how he had changed. The strongest argument stemmed from his observation of others who possessed quirks that were equally, or in some cases, significantly, more potent than his own. His desire to be the best was only strengthened by the fact that he was no longer the strongest. At the same time, he was able to act civil, to a certain extent, because of those who could confront him. The League of Villains brought the other thing. More precisely, the conclusion of All Might's heroic career. Even though All Might's quirk was already waning, he was obviously upset about what had happened and even went so far as to place the blame on himself. Naturally, the Paranormal Liberation War followed, during which time society all but collapsed, heroes were surrendering, and a group of high school students were compelled to mature. Katsuki was one of them. The best course of action would be to simply stop being friends with Katsuki Bakugo. Making Katsuki a better person than he was not his responsibility. His parents did that, and he did it shortly after. He believed that he was superior to everyone, and he would allow that to determine when he became a public relations scandal. If he says or does something incorrectly, then it's okay. No his issue. It was his problem, of course. Because he had to take into account one crucial element. Katsuki was a stupid child. A very stupid child who allowed power to get to his head, but still a stupid child. The fact that everyone, including the teacher and other students, encouraged the notion that he would be the greatest hero by default did not help. He couldn't hold Katsuki entirely responsible for his behavior. Furthermore, what sort of hero would he be if he gave up in this way? The Midoriya in him also didn't want to part with a friend. Then he frowned down at his drawing, then tore it out and tossed it aside. Park Dagoba. A week later, Katsuki held up a stick and declared, "Okay, I say we're going this way." Tsubasa and two other boys concurred, and Izuku, holding a notebook, trailed behind. "Hey, pay attention, Deku. You're a part of the Bakugo Hero Agency out of pity, so act like it." Izuku wrote in his notebook, his nose never leaving it, and he said, "I am." Already taking action, Tsubasa declared, "Forget about that loser, Bakugo. Let's just head on and find some villains to beat up." Katsuki glanced at Izuku once more before scoffing and continuing on. Izuku thought, "How am I going to make this work?" and caught up with ease. Then there's Tsubasa. Fuck me. I forgot that his grandfather is a villain and that kid is going to become a Nomu. He needed to figure out a way to keep their friendship from getting any worse than it already is. What was there for him to do? He had no power, a feeble body, and, most importantly, no one with whom he could communicate. He was still only 4 years old. There are a lot of things he would really like to discuss with someone or leave even a small note about. His own knowledge was the only evidence, and it was insufficient to be taken seriously. He was extremely irritated by the idea of so many people who could be helped. With a faint frown, Katsuki asked, "You still writing in that stupid notebook, Deku?" Izuku confirmed that he had referred to the boy by his nickname before saying, "Yup. I still want to be a hero after all, Kachin." Katsuki growled in frustration, "Are you stupid or something? You can't be a hero without a quirk, idiot." "Says who?" "Say what?" Izuku responded, "Says who? I don't remember hearing anyone needing a quirk." "What? Of course you need one. You can't be a great hero without one," Katsuki replied. Izuku asked, "Did All Might say that?" Which caused Katsuki to pause for a moment. "Or any hero? I only heard that from the others." Katsuki stopped and detonated an explosion in front of them, saying, "Shut it, Deku. You don't know what you're talking about. You see this? I already know I'm gonna be an awesome hero. Just like All Might is," the teacher said to themselves. Katsuki grinned as he said, "Of course you're gonna be an awesome hero. This smirk died a cold, ugly death. But I'm still gonna be a hero." "You're nothing without a power, you moron," Katsuki declared, destroying the notebook he was holding with his subsequent explosion. "Weak, quirkless people like you Deku don't get to become heroes. So forget about it already." Katsuki turned away, stomped to where the others were, and growled. After observing him for a while, Izuku took a second notebook out of his bag. He was just drawing with it, and he fully expected it. But he put the burned notebook in a bag for later. Izuku trailed behind, watching as they all shouted and played around. Naturally, Katsuki was still in the lead, with everyone else trailing behind him. Without a doubt, they were still making fun of him, but they also hadn't yet tried anything physical. Still, he could manage it. Benefits of currently being mentally 32. He was going to be old as hell by the time he joined UA, damn it. Katsuki yelled, "This way. Try and keep up already," and led them to a precarious bridge. Even the small river beneath them didn't appear to be very deep, so it wasn't that high off the ground. Before the full memory flooded back, Izuku thought, "Wait, this looks familiar. Hang on, this isn't safe." Tsubasa sneered and said, "Shut it, Deku. Bakugo knows better than you." Katsuki was on the bridge when he heard a loud creaking, just as he was about to yell too. Before he knew it, he was plummeting into the river below. "Son of a Kachan!" Izuku exclaimed, hurried over, and dropped his notebook. Before they began to back off, he saw that the others were completely terrified. "Hey! We need to get down there." After saying, "Forget that. This is your fault as far as I'm concerned," Tsubasa turned around and fled. Izuku scowled at them and shook his head as the others did the same. He followed the side and headed down to the river without hesitation. Even though it was only a small drop, he saw Katsuki sitting in the river, obviously terrified by what had just transpired. In any case, he walked over with his hand outstretched to support him. With genuine concern, Izuku inquired, "Are you okay?" However, Katsuki didn't like the gesture and didn't merely slap his hand to express it. No, regardless of the burn he would undoubtedly leave behind, he had to use his quirk to accomplish this. "Ow, you little. I don't need your help, Deku," screamed Katsuki, who was obviously upset and on the verge of a fit. Least of all from a useless, quirkless, Deku of all things. He started to stomp off, but to his chagrin, Izuku moved in front of him. "Out of my way." "No," Katsuki shouted. "Stop acting like you're better than me, Deku," while launching detonators. Izuku had every intention of calling him out on his nonsense. "I said no, why are you even acting like this? You weren't like this back then, but the moment you got your quirk you decided to be like this." Yes, this probably could have waited, but he was aware that their friendship would have ended at this point. "You have an amazing quirk, but you can't just bully people or act like they are beneath you because of it. You're better than that, I know you are." Red in the face, Katsuki screamed, "Shut up! Shut up! You don't know a thing, Deku." Because of his fall, his interactions with Izuku, and the way he was treated like a lower-class person, he was throwing a fit. "Everyone knows I'm better than them. Those extras. The teachers. Even you said it, so quick acting like you're better than me. You have nothing and you won't be nothing." The direct statement from Izuku was, "All Might would hate you." As Katsuki lunged forward, prepared to blow Izuku's face off, something snapped in him. But the boy had taken him by surprise by swerving to the side as Katsuki stumbled over a rock. He fell on his back, unconscious, after slamming his face into a tree. "Seriously? You better be alright. I swear if I have to." Before the rain began to fall, there was a loud crack of lightning. Tsubasa and the boys thought Katsuki had learned the profanity because they heard it all at once. Household of Midoriya. Later, with a moan, Katsuki woke up and blinked a few times before slowly sitting up. He quickly became aware that he was in Deku's house. Too many times he had been here. He snapped his head in the direction of their TV when he heard All Might laughing. In front of his debut video, which was the most watched video globally, was. Katsuki hissed, "Deku!" to get his attention. His burned notebook was beside him as he scribbled in a new one. Izuku said, "Hey, Kachan, you alright?" but was met with a growl. Katsuki jumped up and screamed, "You quirkless bastard! Who do you think you are?" while exploding. A deafening scream of dread came just as he was about to show him his place. He froze in place and turned slowly to face his mother, who was standing in the kitchen, saying, "Katsuki Bakugo." His father, Masuru, looked disappointed, his aunt, Inko, looked shocked and appalled, and she alone looked angry. "What did you just say?" With his face flushed, Katsuki exclaimed, What are you doing here, hag?" There was no doubt that Mitsuki was incensed. "What am I, you little brat? I came here because I got a call from your aunt that Izuku had carried you here through the rain after you got hurt. Of course that's after I heard from Inko that you've been bullying Izuku here." "Who cares about that? It's just a Deku." Katsuki growled, then froze in the face of Inko's intense gaze. Although he was accustomed to seeing it from his mother, it was extremely unsettling to see his aunt staring at him with that expression. Scary. Mitsuki shouted, "His name is Izuku Midoriya and you should know better since you've known him since you were babies." Katsuki recoiled initially, but then growled. Katsuki insisted, "Like he matters. I know for a fact that he isn't going to be anything beyond useless. Why do you care about him? Any of you?" He yelled, "Katsuki Bakugo." When he saw Inko's angry expression, there was a frightening green glow around her eyes. The anger turned to sadness as the words, "That boy is my son. The one I raised. The one I took care of for all of his life. And you want to question why I care about my son?" faded. "Oh, when Izuku came home and showed me the burns on his hand, I thought it was just an accident, but..." As Mitsuki consoled her, Inko appeared on the verge of tears. Katsuki. Katsuki turned to face his father. The disillusioned expression was too unfamiliar to him. He had never felt this way before, not even from his mother. I don't know what to say. I know you've gotten a bit cocky after getting your quirk, but... Son, this is wrong." Masuru, who was undoubtedly under stress from the unexpected news, pressed his fingers into his nose. "God. Katsuki, why would you do this? To your best friend?" With a pop of explosion, Katsuki screamed, "Because he's nothing. That's all he is and that's all he's gonna be." Izuku sat up behind him and sighed without anyone noticing. "Why? Because he's a useless, quirkless, degak. When Inko saw her boy hit Katsuki's head with a book, she exclaimed in shock, Izuku. Izuku said bluntly, sorry, but he was talking stupid. Huh? Who do you think? He became alarmed when Izuku turned to face him, holding up a book. Even more terrifying was the look he gave him, the same one his mother had just given him. Izuku calmly said, zip it, before focusing on the adults. Please don't be mad at Kachan. It isn't his fault that he's thinking stupid. With obvious concern for Izuku, Inko said, but Izuku, you heard what he said, right? It isn't right for any child to think like this. Izuku said in his most innocent voice, but it's not his fault, Mama. It was those teachers who kept saying that Kachan was gonna be the best and better than the rest of the class. They even said that I was stupid for wanting to be a hero and that Kachan shouldn't hang around me if he wanted to be the best. They did what? Asked Inko, her anger evident in her voice. Izuku responded, yeah, even the other kids were saying it. He was telling the truth when they said he was delusional and would fail. He was even kept away from the other children. As though it were a given, Katsuki exclaimed, TCH. That's because the teachers obviously know better, Deku. That's why they're teachers. The parents fell silent, and Izuku was limited to shaking his head. What? It's what everyone says. They know I'm the best and that Deku is nothing. See? He listens to stupid things. Izuku gave a straightforward explanation. Stop that, and stop judging me, Deku, exclaimed Katsuki. He forced himself not to facepalm when he saw Katsuki growl but nod. And did Tsubasa say that? For heaven's sake, you stupid troublemaker. Mitsuki muttered, as if she were about to kill someone, so it was the teachers overall. Putting that bull in my child's ears. They're gonna have a handful when I get my hands on them. With an even more severe scowl, Masura said, by both of us. I should have known when we started receiving those letters from the teachers about how good Katsuki was that something was up. Katsuki said, they're just telling the truth. He then hissed in agony as his mother hit his head. Ow, what was that for? Mitsuki shouted, for listening to stupid things at school. In the meantime, Inko approached her son and gave him a hug. Izuku, I'm so sorry, Inko cried, crying uncontrollably. If I had known then I would have spoken to those teachers about what they've been doing. It's okay, mommy. In any case, it was going to go on. Least in this school. With a wiping motion, Inko withdrew, saying, I just wanted to tell Kachan to be better. Enraged and perplexed by the whole situation, Katsuki yelled, I am better, I'm gonna be the next #1 hero. You don't have a quirk so you can't. Izuku spoke first before anyone else could. Izuku said, startlingly smiling, you can be the #1 if you really want to, but that isn't gonna stop me from being a hero. After all, it's what we talked about. Becoming heroes together so we can be as greater as All Might is. As Katsuki's thoughts were difficult to change, he remarked, but you can't become a hero without a quirk. Everyone's always said that you need a quirk. Mitsuki opened her mouth to speak, but her husband cut her off. While keeping a watchful eye on Katsuki, Masuru stated, let it sort itself out. We'll step in if it gets heated. The boy appeared to be much more temperamental than he had anticipated. Then I'll be the first quirkless hero. It sounds pretty cool to me, Izuku replied. Katsuki growled as he said, but you're weak. You aren't even good at things, and pointed at him. For crying out loud, he was a child when he said, yeah, I know I'm weak. Katsuki appeared prepared to argue, but Izuku swiftly went on, that's why I have to get stronger and better so I can help people and fight bad guys in the future. That's why I want you to train with me. Huh? Izuku's smile turned teasing as he said, you heard me? We should train together so we can get even stronger than All Might. You're gonna need to if you're gonna keep up with me for when I get super ultra strong after all. Katsuki declared, I don't need to train. I can just blow up whatever is in my way, and demonstrated his point with a little explosion. Izuku stated bluntly, I've seen sparklers with more firepower. Mitsuki covered his mouth to conceal her laughter and snorted. Katsuki was just sputtering out, red in the face and smoldering with embarrassment. But I know it can get more powerful than it is right now. That's why I want you to train with me. Katsuki growled menacingly, why should I train with you? I should be training with someone worth my time, not a Deku, instead. Upon witnessing Katsuki's explosions, Izuku said without flinching, I'm not afraid of you for starters. Tsubasa and the others ran off when you fell. I didn't even see anyone come on the way back. But I went down there and I carried you all the way back in the middle of the rain too. Katsuki exclaimed incredulously, that doesn't mean that they're afraid of me. Ignoring the scowl her son had given her, Mitsuki continued, "No, but it also means they aren't your friends either. If they can't be bothered to help you after a fall like that, then they certainly aren't your friends." "I don't need help, heroes don't need help," Katsuki exclaimed, shakily. It wasn't shocking because he had done this in canon as well. Even heroes need help every now and then. Even All Might. He teamed up with so many different heroes around the world. Izuku only had to force Katsuki to comprehend it. "Besides, we're gonna be heroes someday, and when we are, I won't run away from any kind of bad guy." Izuku grinned as Katsuki snarled, "Who do you think you are?" Izuku remained steadfast throughout everything, declaring, "Your best friend, the one who's gonna become a hero." Then he extended his hand to Katsuki, who appeared shook. "Well, what do you say? Wanna be heroes together?" For a moment, Katsuki stared at the hand, wondering what he should do. Then, as he gripped, he slammed his hand into Izuku's, causing an explosion. Izuku. Katsuki, brat. After making the little explosion by mistake, Katsuki froze. When he realized Izuku didn't scream, he stopped himself from pulling away. When he looked up, he saw Izuku's eyes were unwavering, but his smile was somewhat forced. In fact, he was holding his hand more tightly than he had anticipated. "Remember our pledge this time, Kachan," Izuku firmly stated. With a savage smile on his face, Katsuki snarled, "And don't you dare slow me down, Deku." The parents grinned, pleased with the result after careful preparation. When it came to Katsuki Bakugo's complexity, that was the primary problem. He developed his ego by listening to his teachers and classmates compliment him while continuously discouraging Izuku in front of him. Having heard those same words since he was 4 years old, Katsuki became a bully and took everything personally. Izuku needed to confront and shatter that ego. To ensure that Katsuki didn't become too much like his canon self, it was only the beginning. After all, he was just a child who listened to obnoxious people. It was only natural. Children take in information like a sponge and retain it. Katsuki was no exception, and it influenced his thinking over time. Was he trying to manipulate him? Not SHT. Was it something he regretted? No fuck. Dealing with Katsuki Bakugo's intimidation and threats was the one thing he was not going to handle. Furthermore, he only made a slight advancement in his transformation. Given their promise reborn, especially with Mitsuki Bakugo as a mother, he was pretty sure Katsuki would be just as aggressive when it came to being a hero, if not more so. He was able to re-establish his friendship with Katsuki Bakugo on this particular night. Izuku's room, Midoriya residence, late night. After witnessing their kids resolve their differences, the parents couldn't resist inviting Izuku and Katsuki over for a sleepover. Before Katsuki called it at precisely 8 p.m., they had only seen the All Might debut video a few times. He continued to pay attention to what his parents were saying. Katsuki was given the bed tonight because Izuku was still awake and his head was still a little sore from his fall. He had a camping bag and everything, so he was good on the floor. In addition, he could hear their parents discussing their plans for the school in some detail. He was more concerned with his notebook and didn't give a damn. But this wasn't for Hiro's job. A sketchbook, that is. Izuku looked at the little picture he had drawn and thought, "I may be in another world for the time being, but I haven't forgotten anything from my home." He smiled sadly. 3 of the 4 adults were male, and 1 was female. Everyone is wearing suits, laughing, and holding drinks. "I am uncertain whether I will see any of you again. I doubt it, but until then, I will hold your memory near and dear." After that, he closed the notebook entirely and tucked it away behind his cabinet. Then he lay down again and let sleep take over. He needed to rest so that he would be prepared for whatever came up in the years to come. At least as well as he could. Homeroom, Adela High School, 10 years later. Izuku Midoriya, 14, wrote silently in his notebook, reviewing his class notes and occasionally reviewing his own hair notes. He had 3 years of high school to look forward to, so it was just another day in his life. So far, 6 months have been completed. He was just making sure he had everything down for the day because this was the last class. Katsuki, who had not altered his canon appearance much, was at his side. He completed his own homework in advance and wore his school uniform open carelessly. In contrast to the original, Izuku was not nearly as scrawny. Compared to his scrawny self, he now had a much more fit body and stood as tall as Katsuki. But that was where the changes stopped, as Izuku Midoriya had returned to his fatedly normal appearance. He still complied with the regulations and wore his uniform as usual while attending this dreck of a school. He had put in a lot of effort over the previous 11 years, training hard whenever he could and becoming more capable as he aged. After all, these muscles weren't just for show. But the height was a result of drinking a lot of milk. He didn't want to appear short, so what could he say? In addition, it was profitable for Katsuki as well as for him. Rewind. 9-year-old Katsuki roared, "Rahhhh," as he charged at Izuku. The boy with the green hair stood far away, briefly crossing his arms before abruptly thrusting his palm forward. Gah! Damn it! Feeling the impact, Katsuki held his nose before snarling and launching himself forward with an explosion. Izuku effortlessly avoided them, keeping his face straight the entire time, before abruptly circling back to Katsuki. A light kick to the chest knocked the boy backwards and into a tree as he turned to attack. When he tried to stand up, he discovered a stick aimed at his chest. Izuku declared, "I win," and then extended his hand. With a growl, Katsuki stood up and scoffed. Katsuki demanded, "Again." Izuku took a step back and said, "Sure, we'll go at it as many times as it takes." Shortly after, Katsuki got to his feet, just as Izuku tossed the branch aside. "Ready, go." With a kick into gear, Katsuki rushed forward, raising his hands and launching an explosion from his right. Izuku anticipated this and ducked and shifted out of Katsuki's attack before eventually moving around him. But Katsuki slammed his elbow into Izuku and abruptly blasted himself backward. Izuku was taken by surprise and was carried off his feet as Katsuki spun around to strike. In the process, Izuku kicked the boy over into a tree and then abruptly kicked upward into his stomach. "Damn it!" Katsuki snarled and hurried to his feet, while Izuku followed suit. Before hurrying ahead, they were both glaring at one another. "Deku!" Katsuki was about to blast him away, but he stopped in the middle and instead blasted the ground in front of them. "Crap!" Izuku shielded his eyes from the smoke by moving his arm over them. But Katsuki abruptly pinned him to the ground with a hand over his head and tackled him through it. Double crap. "Ha! I win!" Katsuki jumped back up on his feet and cheered for himself. Izuku sat up and watched in shock as he began to jump and dance. Although it wasn't his first victory, he was most likely most proud of this one. "Hey, kids!" Izuku grinned as he leapt to his feet. "You win all right, nice move." Izuku laughed at Katsuki as he declared, "Damn right I win. And I'm gonna keep on winning until I become the #1 hero, just you wait and see, huh? What's so funny, Deku?" Izuku tries not to laugh as he responds, "Nothing, it's just, is that gonna be your catchphrase? You say it a lot." "No way. It's gonna be something awesome. Like, die," Katsuki asserted, demonstrating his point by blowing his hands. "Nobody else is shouting that at the villains, though. Anyway, since you prevailed this time, how about we get you a spicy bowl at that ramen joint?" Izuku watched Katsuki's eyes enlarge with anticipation as he offered his treat. "Yes. The final person there must bring back takeout," Katsuki shouted and fled right away, with Izuku trailing behind, having already made plans to order takeout. At this time, it's hard to believe how far I've come since then. Not really. He had done a lot of damage to their body during regular training, and at times he even scared Katsuki with some of his ideas for recovery. But I had to be ready just in case. There's already so many changes to this world I wasn't expecting. All Might was even more active than before, and since he was visible virtually every minute of the day and did not have the black skull eyes, he most likely wasn't missing a lung this time and had actually defeated All for One. It was debatable, though, whether All for One was dead or alive. If he missed it once, he could miss it again. All Might was stronger than ever if he were a gambler, and he was even more of a pillar than he had been before his injuries, but he wasn't just the world's #1 hero. In addition to the hero ranking system in Japan, there was now an official world hero system, and All Might was at the top of that, too. What was even more bizarre was that All Might had reportedly trained the majority of the ones on the board. To be honest, MHA didn't spend a lot of time exploring other countries because it was primarily focused on the story of Izuku Midoriya, which took place in Japan. This isn't to say that the other countries weren't significant, but the main antagonist was primarily interested in Japan, so that's where the story stayed. In any case, the most significant thing he had to mention was that, as far as he knew, All Might was healthy, which led to another recent consideration. Everyone gets one. Before he saw Izuku Midoriya charge in to face the sludge villain, when other heroes had chosen to do nothing, he was a quirkless boy who ran forward to save his childhood bully of all people. In the original timeline, All Might had dismissed the idea of a quirkless hero, believing it to be bad timing. Of course, All Might still saved him and Katsuki, but it was from that moment that Izuku Midoriya was chosen to inherit the quirk of One for All. He was essentially his uncle. or big brother, and he couldn't guarantee that those events could occur again, least of all when it came to meeting a particular villain who just so happened to be pursued by All Might. With that knowledge in mind, he most definitely wasn't going to risk Katsuki's or anyone's life. Was that an issue? Well, not really, not really. There was always a factor that he fully considered, even though a quirkless hero has never been heard of. Hi, Midoriya. Let's see ya hold this. Izuku hardly looked back when he noticed several classmates straining to hold a bag. Refusing to sigh, Izuku nodded and said, sure. He extended his hand and took the bag from its handle, holding it up with little to no effort, much to their surprise. Is that all? Is that all? That's 480 pounds or more, a boy said. Izuku felt the weight and laid it on the floor, saying, about 450 actually. As the boys moaned and dragged the bag away, he returned to his work. The superhuman factor was the element that nobody seemed to be able to comprehend. There was a constant reminder that this world had entirely different logic rules than the one Rukido was from. Some might argue that these feats are simply a result of their job or quirks, but there was a reminder that some feats are simply a part of the human body, and there are a lot of things in this universe. All Might gives Katsuki a gut punch through a building, and he emerges exploding. When testing Izuku, Mirai dodged his attacks with ease. Future sight isn't enough to give you the speed you need to avoid someone like full cowling. Shoto created the stain that breaks through solid ice, and his blood-paralyzing power doesn't give him the strength to do it at random. He had the most time to train his body to go beyond its normal limit, so he essentially powered up one for all into a state that went beyond superhuman limits, even beyond what it was probably meant to be. Ironically, All Might was the best example of this. 7 people, even though that power accumulated over time, didn't easily equate to giving him the ability to change the weather with a single punch. Even in his own world, there were numerous superhuman feats that were either attained through hard work or simply through sheer adrenaline. Marvel, DC, and other anime all had their own definitions of superhuman limits being surpassed and helping the characters of those universes. And that was just this world. The original Izuku had managed to get strong enough to pull a bulked-up All Might while he was sitting on a fridge, but those were topics for another time. In any case, the superhuman factor was very much real, disregarding the quirk factor and concentrating more on what the human body could accomplish. As for him, well, he could definitely lift more. Are those losers still attempting that nonsense? You wouldn't have to worry about them asking you if you brought one of those weights from home, Katsuki said, scoffing slightly. Oh, it's all right. It's not as if they're hurting me, Izuku laughed. It's still bothersome. Katsuki frowned, especially when they were giving you shit all last year. He was ridiculed by many of the students for being quirkless, and some of the teachers even joined in, either by openly insulting him or by trying to encourage him. Katsuki was furious about this, especially since he and Izuku could take down the entire school if they so desired. Why do you even bother dealing with them? They are not necessarily bad people just because they listen to those types of people. Izuku shrugged and said, it's just the way they grew up. He had the mindset of a fully grown adult, believing that nothing they said or did could truly cause harm. Izuku grinned as Katsuki asserted, whatever, they're just extras at the end of the day and I know damn well you'll prove them wrong. You are correct in that regard. Speaking of which, when we have the opportunity, how about we do another sparring session? Izuku challenged Kacchan. I just can't let that slide, Kacchan. You're ahead by 3. Oh, bring it the fuck on, Deku. Well, that dumb nickname did endure, at least it wasn't used out of animosity anymore. Izuku looked up, his eyes widening as he discovered who had entered. Attention class. Their teacher said, catching some, but not all, of their attention. We have a new student joining us from today onward. Allow me to introduce Himiko Toga. Her hair was much cleaner, her Cheshire-like smile had been replaced by a nervous and restrained one. Her movements were not at all free and seemed strict and stoic, and even her eyes, which were now supported by a pair of glasses, didn't seem as crazy. It was the Himiko Toga, someone who worked under the League of Villains in the future and was very much a dangerous person. But he could tell she was about to lose it. After a while, Toga said, hello, it's nice to meet everyone. She looked down, trembling a little, and either received hellos, or some laughter. Sit down in the rear. The teacher pushed her forward, causing her to yell. She recovered and moved to the back, ignoring some of the people chatting to her. She proceeded to the darkest corner she could find before saying, now, please, be quiet. We'll have you get adjusted to the class in the upcoming days. There was a chance here, but they were not quiet, and Izuku had to fight the impulse to look at Toga while they were all chatting and working together, not wanting to frighten or unnerve her. An opportunity to rescue Toga before the situation worsened. Courtyard. Adela High School. The courtyard was crowded and it was lunchtime. Izuku had left Katsuki behind, stating that he needed to check on something he had forgotten, and he wondered anxiously, where is she? I don't know if I'll ever get another chance like this to do something for her. He would live the rest of his life regretting it. Himiko was trying to force herself to eat the lunch her parents had made her. While it might have been a tasty meal for anyone else, it was bland and tasteless to her. She looked away from her food for a moment and then around at the throng of people, her heart pounding fast and her breathing rapidly becoming shallow. I'm a good girl. Don't be a monster again. Just eat your food and ignore it, she said, snapping her head back to her lunch in an attempt to get herself to pay more attention to it. But she couldn't because she tasted something that was deemed abnormal, inhumane, and even made her own flesh and blood call her a monster. I can hold myself back. I waited this long, I can go one for longer, she said. Her vision blurred, and her ears twitched as she swore she could hear the very veins holding blood wanting to burst free. Yes, she had wanted blood for a very long time, ever since she was a child and killed a beautiful bird that was covered in it. Her parents were so furious that they made her never drink anything that had to do with blood, and she listened to them for a very long time. However, they were unaware that her desire for blood, to drink it, to consume it, was ingrained in her nature, right down to the most basic of her instincts. Others would have been frightened. Her parents would be upset about it. She would be a monster. She had already lied to her parents about wanting to change schools and cared about a cute boy with curly hair, but she found very little reason to care as time went on. She had wanted his blood, so badly, but she was able to control herself. Now that there were so many new faces, she couldn't say she liked anyone, but maybe, just maybe she could finally let loose. No, be good. Please, Himiko thought, trembling, and left because she didn't want to risk breaking. However, now that she heard what people were saying behind each other's back, it was much harder. But it shouldn't matter. It's just a little bit. No, I should have more. We have this for a reason, she thought as she looked to her side and felt a box cutter in her bag. But I should be good, not bad. Not a monster. Shouldn't I? Her mind went blank as she reached for the box cutter. Hi there. Eep, Himiko stopped any train of thought and ripped her hand away from her bag. Hi there? I take it you're new to our class? You mean Toga Himiko? The boy in front of her smiled and said, my name is Izuku Midoriya, and Himiko nodded. I hope you've been getting along well with everyone in our class. They've been fine. Did you need something? Is a lie, but whatever. She wondered if she had missed it or if it was a quirk when she saw him suddenly holding a notebook and pencil. Speaking of quirks, would you mind if I asked you about your quirk? My quirk? Himiko felt herself sweat. She wanted to say no, but the idea of an opportunity came to mind. Sure. Excellent. Before he spoke, she mentioned that his notebook was marked number 13, and Izuku sat down beside her with his notebook open. So, what is your quirk? Himiko watched as he listed it right away and explained. It was diagnosed as transform by my doctor. How does it operate? Is it necessary to transform, or can you do it on your own? Izuku asked naively enough, and he observed her move in place while remaining silent. Knowing full well that he was still listening, Himiko whispered, I would need some blood. She expected to hear some sort of mockery or disgust, and fear accompanied both, so she felt her heart race as her breathing grew harsher and slower. Blood. I need it. I deserve it. How would it operate? Consumption, touch. Her body began to pound harshly as she said, I drink it. I understand. Does transforming require a specific quantity? With her fangs bared and her eyes fixed on Izuku's neck, she licked her lips and said, I need a lot to make sure I can transform for long periods, I think. Huh. Do you have that box cutter there for that reason? When she looked down at her hand and saw it there, in the open, Izuku's question caused her to freeze. Aye. Himiko was at a loss for words, not even realizing she was holding it, believing she had left it in her bag. I didn't mean to. Are you all right? She was close, and it could happen right now, so Izuku asked without shifting or even turning away. I inquired about your well-being. Does it have to do with your quirk? Izuku asked, a hand passing across hers, clearly bewildered and not accustomed to being asked that question. I'm not sure I understand. He should be screaming. Why isn't he screaming? Himiko confessed, her mind racing as she gripped her weapon tightly, wanting his blood simply because he was being so kind, but she felt strange about the question. Blood quirks are uncommon enough. Those who must drink blood are even more uncommon, Izuku began, ignoring her discomfort as she fidgeted in her chair. They must regularly consume blood, just like they would food and water. When Himiko heard this, she appeared more terrified and started to get up, but Izuku grabbed her arm and said, "Easy there. Any attempts to do so might cause any long-lasting damage to them as a whole. Simply ask for blood if you need it." Asked? Himiko was still tense, but she didn't try to leave. "Yes, in my situation." Izuku held out his arm and said, "I don't mind giving you some blood." He saw her eyes turn cat-like as he prepared to attack, and he spoke quickly, saying, "No using the box cutter though, that can hurt bad." And no one had ever offered her blood before, and her own parents were disgusted by everything that surrounded her quirk, but even when she killed that bird, it didn't even come close to this. Nevertheless, Himiko couldn't help the moan that came from doing so. It felt so freeing, so liberating, so delicious. It was a wonder how she had gone so long without blood. Not even her own could ever satisfy her, but someone else's had hit all the right places. He had very tough skin. Well, at least I'm not getting stabbed, Izuku thought, his foot kicking the box cutter under the seat, which Himiko had dropped in favor of his arm. He sat motionless, letting Himiko taste it while staring at her head. "I wonder." He petted her head lightly without giving it much thought. She purred as well. "Fuck, that's adorable." Meanwhile, Himiko was meowing contentedly, probably enjoying every drop of blood. He was fortunately not experiencing dizziness, but it would have been better than actually hearing some of the other students' remarks. "What's happening there? Has Midoriya gotten a girl? How?" "It's probably just a quirk thing, still weird though." "Weird is all that loser, Midoriya is." "True that. Maybe we should help that poor girl." "No way. If she wants to hang around that quirkless dreamer, then let her. She's right, after all she has to be as much of a loser to even humor him." "Really?" Izuku thought, rolling his eyes, morons. It appeared that Himiko was too engrossed in her own world to give the remarks any thought. "At least I stopped something negative from happening. At least for the time being. Before I can declare this a save, I must see it through." "Hold on, does she have cat ears?" "The fuck is this?" Izuku asked, looking up to see Katsuki glaring at him. Izuku casually explained, "Just helping somebody out. Quirk instincts and whatnot." Katsuki turned to face the other people who were staring and said, "Yeah, that sounds about right." Then he smirked dreadfully at them and detonated an explosion. "Hey! What are you punks talking about over there?" They instantly dispersed, causing Izuku to laugh a little and Katsuki to chuckle to himself. When his arm was at last free, he turned to face Himiko. The fact that he was still conscious and not being drained dry made some sense to her, even though she appeared more eager for blood. As Katsuki gave him a strange look, Izuku joked, "So, am I good? I mean, I've tasted my blood before and I think it's alright." "When the hell did you? Every time you've busted my nose." "Right. It was so good." Himiko paused as she became aware of what had just transpired. As her fear grew, she withdrew, her nerves aching. "I'm sorry Izuku began to say, "Hey, it's alright," but was cut off. "But it isn't," Himiko swore, her eyes welling with tears. "I wasn't supposed to break my promise to my parents, being inhumane or worse, an M-monster." Unaware that his questioning made Izuku proud, Katsuki asked, "What are you on about? Why the hell would anyone call you a monster over that? If it's part of your quirk, then it's natural." Before hastily adding, Izuku stated, "He's right. You're no monster when your following instincts are based on your quirk. Which is why it's so dangerous that you haven't had any blood in so long." With genuine confusion, Himiko said, What do you mean?" Himiko gulped and then nodded as Izuku explained. "Some quirks have certain characteristics beyond their actual diagnosis. In your case, because you need blood in order to transform, you have a natural taste for it. You need to consume because it's part of your base instincts. If you don't, it can negatively affect your mind. When was the last time you actually had blood?" Himiko said humbly, Since I was 4. When I told my parents they called me a monster and made sure that I wouldn't do anything like that again." She gave Katsuki a violent flinch when he said, "Your parents are fucking morons." A part of her wanted to respond, but when she found herself strongly disliking them, there was no use in any kind of defense. Seriously, quirk counseling is a thing for a reason. Izuku would personally prefer to slap her parents' souls, but he would eventually settle for cursing them. As much as I hate to say it, he's right. There are hundreds of programs that can ensure that would have helped you when it came to needing blood. Suppressing it like that is the worst thing they could have decided for you. He continued without noticing her flinch when he said, "If it keeps going like this, you may snap someday. We can tell someone and they will help you. With more tears in her eyes, Himiko questioned, do you really think so? Do you really think I'm not a monster? With assurance, Izuku stated, I know so. Himiko lost control and clung to him while sobbing uncontrollably. Izuku put one arm around her and patted her back with the other. There was a softness in Katsuki's usual frown as he watched it all. Well, we've arrived. I promise to personally ruin the cause if any arbitrary bullshit ruins this. Homehold of Midoriya. 2 weeks later, Izuku sat on the couch and thought, well, it's definitely random, but I can't call it bullshit. As Himiko drew blood from his shoulder, he was petting her head and using the other hand to read through his phone. Following the incident, they informed the school's principal about Himiko's case, in which Katsuki was the main accuser. As expected, he paid no attention to Izuku and instead listened to Katsuki. He was a bastard, but a useful one. Himiko had told the police everything when he called them. Not surprisingly, they discussed this with her parents so they could hear it firsthand. They even provided justification for it without even disputing it. Fools. Fuckers who were immediately arrested for child abuse and endangerment. They were fortunate that he was unable to slap them. Given their pride in it and how appreciative Himiko ought to have been, it was a closed case. They were now in prison and would not be permitted to approach Himiko unless she specifically ordered it. Which probably never happened. The issue of what to do with Himiko Toga finally arose. Age-wise, she could have supported herself by using the money she earned from the case. The issue, though, was that she still required assistance with her blood and shouldn't be left to live alone in case she developed a medical or mental health issue. Fortunately, the answer was provided by the amazing mother, Inko Midoriya. She was among the first to learn about it and wholeheartedly backed the choice to ensure Himiko received all the assistance she required. Of course, certain officials would be keeping an eye on them to make sure she never experienced that again. Fortunately, she had agreed and was now contentedly a part of their family. Not as the family's first, but as a real member. She was now his sister, Himiko Midoriya. Although it was a welcome change, he would be lying if he claimed to have planned on that. She was definitely getting used to the situation. Not just to the program that had provided her with an ample supply of blood, not to mention his own. In addition, she had to decide what her parents wanted her to be and what she truly wanted to be. Even though she had been this way for a while, she continued to attend their school in an effort to improve herself. She was content and at ease for the moment. He was more than happy to assist, even though he was a little thirsty for his blood. On the other hand, Izuku was proud. He essentially kept someone from losing it and turning into something worse than themselves. After all, she became a villain primarily because of her parents. Naturally, that was also a result of their attempts to create social cues. Himiko was enraged that so many people thought his quirk was odd. There were many problems in this society. So many, in fact, that he was truly surprised they had persisted so long after heroes and villains first appeared. After all, superpowers were all the rage, and how you were treated depended on whether you had a good or bad one. It seemed like they were given very little information about the issue and how to proceed, even though everything was resolved at the end of the series. He seriously doubted that the end of Japan was necessary to transform the entire world. In comparison to the norms of this world, not so much. However, that simply meant that he had a real opportunity to try to make things better, at least that was his hope. Done, Himiko exclaimed, letting a contented smile spread across her face. Izuku said softly, think that can hold you over till later? And Himiko nodded enthusiastically. Good. Surprised you still prefer to drink from me rather than your supply. Himiko asserted that nothing ever beats the first drink. Izuku thought, twitching slightly, don't I know it? Damn it, I'm missing drinking again. The drawback of being born as a child was having to wait to consume alcohol. He could still clearly recall the time he stole some sake from Andy Mitsuki's cupboard. Best. An error. Never, if you say so. Oh, your show is coming on soon. Himiko exclaimed, oh, you're right, and hurried to the kitchen. Get up. We need to grab as many snacks for it. Izuku listened to her and could only laugh. Later, he could concentrate on hero books and society. The best thing he could do now was to live in the present. Living room, Midoriya household. 1 month, Katsuki opened the door and went inside, saying, hey, is anyone home? Since it was the weekend and he fully intended to spend it with their break, he was dressed more casually. He laughed when he heard Himiko's voice and how happy she sounded. In the kitchen, she was happily preparing lunch when he stepped in, her own clothes a little rumpled from the amount of food she was producing. Hey Kat-sensei. Himiko laughed as the boy snarled, Didn't I tell you not to call me that, Fangs? Himiko asserted, you have me a nickname, so I gave you one, as Katsuki kept growling. Besides, it works out given how you're teaching me how to cook properly. Because of her parents' behavior, Himiko had to learn how to cook for herself, but what she produced truly appalled Katsuki and worried Inko. To help her maintain her health, they both agreed to assist her in cooking. While scoffing, Katsuki said, TCH. Someone had to. Fortunately, she picked things up quickly, at least the fundamentals. Where's Auntie and Deku at? Mamadoriya had to go into work at the last minute while Izu is out shopping. Himiko responded, as Katsuki gave him a slight frown. I think you can still catch up with him if you hurry. Katsuki joined her by the table and said, no point. The nerd won't be that long. He raised an eyebrow at what she was making. Katsudon. Himiko's playful smile gave way to an honest one as she said, I wanted to thank them. They've done a lot for me and I wanted to pay them back. For helping me. For taking me into their family. They were both too kind for their own good. Ha. As if they'd take it. It was fortunate that his family was more than ready to support them in times of need. Well, that was never pretty when they didn't. Still. You good? With this whole deal they have you? He nodded as she sat down and removed her apron. Oh, you mean my blood supply, he said. It's been great for the most part. Their blood isn't the greatest in the world compared to Izuku's though. Nothing can beat having it from the source after all. In order to confirm that Himiko's agreement was still solid, Katsuki said, TCH. Good. He was aware that Izuku would have said something different, though. Just so you know, if you do ever run low and can't any from Deku then, you can have some of my blood. Himiko twitched, not startled, but certainly taken aback. Are you sure? Of course I'm fucking sure. It's basically donating blood or something like that, Katsuki clarified. Himiko acknowledged, her fears resurfacing. But I normally bite into Izuku and Mamadoriya when I do that. It was not overlooked. Katsuki stated bluntly, yeah, and you purr like a cat when you do so. Big whoopee do. At that, Himiko hissed, but he chose to ignore it and get right to the point. Listen, Fangs. I already made it clear I don't give a damn about what you need for your quirk. It's normal. Besides, if I get scared of giving some blood, then I might as well call it quits about being a hero. If you're sure. Would you mind if I have some now? Himiko said, conspicuously refrained. Her eyes immediately met Katsuki's as he simply slammed his arm against the table while raising an eyebrow. But unlike the first time, she just bit into his arm while bending down. She purred and drew upon his blood without raising much of a flinch. After a few minutes, Katsuki inquired, so, how'd I taste, Fangs? Spicy, Himiko laughed and said. At that, Katsuki rolled his eyes, but he was happy that she was content. Thank you again, Bakugo. They sat in silence for a while before he said, TCH, just call me Katsuki. Wanna raid Deku's room? Definitely, as soon as I finish my lunch, Himiko concurred. Streets, Musutafu Izuku was leaving another video store with a resolute expression on his face, while Katsuki and Himiko were at home. Izuku Midoriya was a hero fanboy at heart, and that was one thing that would never change. He had to get his hands on a video game brawler featuring pro heroes in Japan after learning about it. Naturally, everyone wanted one as well, which led to many stores treating it like a Black Friday sale. To make matters worse, he had a bad habit of assisting others. Here kitty. PS's, PSS, PSS. Izuku was attempting to calm a young boy's cat while perched in a tree. The cat bit his hand and gave him a spiteful glare. But rather than recoiling, he merely rubbed beneath its neck, which made it halt its attack and purr. It then deftly leapt from the tree and landed in the boy's arm, leaving Izuku with nothing to do but perspire. Well, that's dawn. The branch then snapped. As Izuku helped her across the street, an elderly woman held onto his arm and said, "Thank you for the help, young man." Izuku was about to leave when she abruptly took hold of his arm once more. "Anytime, ma'am. Eh?" The woman pointed across the busy and swiftly moving street and said, "I think I left my purse. Would you mind getting it for me?" "Yes, I can." Izuku was determined to go into a store for the game, but he stopped when he saw someone attempting to move around with multiple grocery bags. He sighed as a number of All Might fans eagerly pushed past him as he approached the person to assist them. But all Izuku, Rukido, Midoriya needed was determination. He saw another store on his list, one he hadn't visited in months, and without waiting, he went inside and began looking through the shelves. It was surprisingly empty, but that suited him because he hurried to the back, where his eyes immediately focused on the silhouette of All Might on a cover and snatched it up. Ultimate Hero Vortex. Okay. Mission accomplished. He knew that showing this off would make Katsuki jealous, but it would be worth it. Just need to avoid a flash mob this time. People are vicious when it comes to this stuff. But before he could leave, someone said something. Is it the final one? When he turned around, he saw a man who looked somewhat familiar. He was tan, wore a basic gray hoodie with black cargo pants and shoes, had short white hair, narrow red eyes, and a pair of white rabbit ears. Please tell me you're a stock guy here and that you just happened to be putting that up. Sadly no, Izuku said, causing the man to groan. Fuck it. Izuku heard the guy mutter, I already went through 7 blocks too, which was obviously meant to be inadvertent, but he still winced a little because it was difficult to get some things like this. How about you accept it in that scenario? I know what it's like missing out on something you like, Izuku said, surprising him by holding out the game. I just can't do that, so hold on. The man, who was obviously not in favor of the idea, said, you found that first, fair and square. Least of all when I can't pay you back. So, could you elaborate on your quirk for me? Izuku abruptly offered a notebook and pen, saying, whenever I can, I enjoy studying quirks. He saw that the boy appeared a little irritated by it, but was still assessing whether it was worth it. If you can tell me about yours, then I'd consider it a good payment. All right. To Izuku's delight, he eventually gave in. You have yourself a deal. Good to hear. I'm Izuku Midoriya by the way. Raiko Usagiyama. It was fucking obvious. Later, Usagiyama, Raiko. Flash Rabbit is a quirk. Flash Rabbit was a unique emitter, mutant type of quirk. The mutant type was evidently derived from his rabbit features, which gave him rabbit-like anatomy and abilities. The quirk gives the user enhanced senses of hearing and smell, as well as increased leg strength that allows them to bounce around as they advance in movement and to the point where their kicks can break even the strongest objects into dust. The second aspect of the quirk was teleportation, which allows the user to leave a mark on anything and teleport to it whenever they want. The teleportation itself is instantaneous and comes in silver, almost blinding light, and the mark itself is black, so if someone messes with it, it can be destroyed. Despite this, the user can teleport others with him, though it takes some effort. There was no use in writing down the minor detail, but if he was being honest, it looked almost exactly like Minato Namazasa's flying Raijin technique from Naruto. Have you got everything you need? Raiko abruptly asked, pulling Izuku's notebook out. Izuku closed the book and said, yeah, it's really helpful. How is the game? To be honest, better than I anticipated. Looking down at his gamer rad, which was now playing the new hero game, Raiko remarked, it could use a story, of course, but what's the whole hero notebook thing about? It looks like you have a lot of them. With the book still in his bag and a ton of notes to make, Izuku replied, 14 of them. You're actually my last entry for this one. And it's just a hobby of mine outside of school. It will also benefit me later on. What? Are you considering becoming a quirk analyst? Raiko asked without raising his head from his screen. Without missing a beat, Izuku responded, hero actually. He didn't miss the faint frown on his face before erasing it. Izuku laughed when Raiko remarked, good for you, though I don't see how learning about other quirks helps you. Having a quirk like the one I wrote down helps because I can get ready for it. Raiko hummed as Izuku explained. That or I can help someone else with another quirk. Sounds like you're taking it seriously. Well, a friend of mine would say that you shouldn't half-ass it when it comes to being a hero. Peef. Sorry, you just don't seem to be the type to curse, Raiko said, unable to contain his snort. Try being the key work when dealing with idiotic nonsense. I try to keep to crap, if I can. Well, tell me about your quirk. Probably something with super intelligence. Those notes were terrifying to look at, Raiko said, concentrating only on his game. Izuku casually remarked, oh, I don't have one. Raiko then dropped his gamer rad, breaking it, but Izuku grabbed it before it could break. You want to be a hero but don't have a quirk? Izuku nodded, handing him back his game with the most carefree expression he had ever seen. Raiko could only let out a dry laugh, rubbing the back of his head. Sorry, I don't mean to laugh. I simply... Well, I've never heard of that before. To be honest, it was a little balding that there wasn't an official quirkless hero. Well, guess I'm the first. Izuku shrugged. Raiko looked down at his game and muttered, I guess you would be. How about you? What are you going to do in the future? Izuku inquired, capturing his interest once more. Are you going to be a hero? I don't think it's bad to be one or anything like that, but I've never been into heroes like that, Raiko said briefly before continuing. Fuck, I hate that question. Don't take this the wrong way, but I can't say it's appealing to me. I don't think I can consider myself one. Raiko blinked, his bewilderment evident on his face. Okay then. It wasn't his job to persuade people to enter the hero business, so Izuku couldn't help but laugh at his expression when he said, I think you're the first person I've ever met that shrugged that off. Izuku received a snort in response to his statement, your life is whatever you wish it to be, my friend. A fortune cookie gave you that? Raiko inquired. Both had laughed at this, but the public had not taken notice or cared. No, just something I heard on the TV before. For Raiko, it was genuinely the best day he had had in a long time. His view of heroes wasn't appreciated by others, which made it difficult to have friends. For Izuku, being a quirkless and trying to make friends was difficult. He was fortunate to have Katsuki as a friend, but no one else showed any genuine interest. Raiko has so far shown himself to be different in that regard. It was a pleasant sensation. You know Midoriya? You're a riot. Before putting the game away, Raiko let a grin appear on his face and pulled out a random card and pencil, writing on it and passing it to Usagiyama. Right back at you, Usagiyama. I ain't the best when it comes to this, but here's my contact info. Raiko handed the card to him. Sorry if this seems weird or anything, but I shouldn't be too long. No, absolutely not. Izuku, like Raiko, had written down the rabbit boy's information before giving it to him. It's not every day I make a friend, Izuku said. People tend to look away from me most of the time because I'm quirkless. Hey, thanks for that. Izuku nodded as Raiko continued. I definitely owe you one. I also left my gamer card there, just in case you ever felt like playing anything. Really, don't bring it up. Izuku sat up and said, I wouldn't mind hanging out again. Raiko followed suit, and Izuku extended his hand. I'll be sure to introduce another friend of mine whenever I get the chance, he said. You mean he's not a mutterer? Raiko shook his hand and asked. As they parted ways, Izuku acknowledged, no, he can be a bit explosive at times, but he means well. Raiko joked with Izuku, snorting, it was good meeting you. Ah, in that case I'll bring something to tune him out. After saying, same to you, later, they had temporarily parted ways. He had never heard of the original Rumi Usagiyama having a brother of any kind, so he thought, I should take into consideration more changes like that. Well, that turned dark quick. Wait, was the encounter rigged? Blah. Focus on anything else. It didn't take long after hearing some commotion, and his interest peaked when he saw a crowd gathered and heard fighting. Study time. Might make me a little late, but nothing new. He worried for Shoto as he walked around the crowd and saw that the fight was actually between Endeavor and a group of villains with other fire quirks. It wasn't particularly noteworthy because they were being thrashed by the number 2 hero of Japan, though he did appear noticeably more irritable than usual. Izuku was about to do the same when he noticed someone on the ground, but without giving it much thought, he dove at them and forced them both to roll out of the way of a flaming fridge. One of the villains suddenly breathed out a ball of fire, blowing up an upper floor building above the crowd and sending flaming debris falling towards them. Naturally, everyone panicked and tried to avoid it as best they could. Izuku hissed and pushed himself to his feet, grabbing the person out of the way before the fire could worsen. Fuck me. He finally stopped and exhaled in relief as they got farther away. Hey, are you okay? I'm fine. Izuku blinked when he recognized the voice, and after closer inspection, he saw that he was actually with Kyoka Jiro, a future UA student and pro-heroine. I just need a moment to get my bearings straight. The cheering indicated that Endeavor had dealt with the villains in question and was now dealing with the damage they had caused, but instead he directed his attention to Kyoka, helping her sit down as she breathed quietly, her jacks securely tucked away in her hoodie as she made a concerted effort to keep her hands away from her ears. How are you feeling? Izuku asked quietly because he didn't want to be noisy after the firefight. With a feeble smile, Kyoka acknowledged, not good, but better than I would have been. The explosion's sound had taken her completely by surprise, and because of how close she was to it, the pain sent her into shock. If no one had noticed, she would have suffered serious injuries or worse. Thanks dude, I owe you one. Izuku grinned and said, you're welcome. But then he frowned and thought, the paramedics and the fire department will be here shortly. Do you think you're okay or do you want to be examined by them? Yes, I am all right. Kyoka shivered and said, I could do without the sirens right now, but it's not the first time it happened, just not that serious. Izuku joined her in standing up and remarked, I figured. Still, I really can't thank you enough dude, Kyoka replied. Really, that's all I need. You and everyone else are safe. Izuku couldn't help but smile as he said, that's what matters most. He wasn't going to minimize what he had down because too many people already did that, but he could still be modest about it. Oh right, Izuku Midoriya by the way. Jiro Kyoka. Izuku snorted at the moniker, nice to meet you, Greenie. That made Kyoka laugh a little. Right back at ya, Jax. Yeah, you and I are gonna be good friends. Are we? She had given him the, are you dumb, look, which Izuku had not missed. Remember, you saved me? Kyoka pointed to the scene behind her, where fans of Endeavor were pleading for autographs, but the number 2 hero was glaring at them, saying, and you're acting humble about it compared to Endeavor at least. It's weird that they're into that, right? Izuku laughed to himself, and Kyoka had to cover her mouth to contain her laughter as she said, it's definitely a kink. On both ends I bet. All right, hand me your phone. After Kyoka finished, she smiled and gave him back his phone number, saying, you better not ghost me or else. Izuku shook his head before following her instructions. They said goodbye and went their separate ways, with Kyoka thinking of the green-haired boy who had saved her and Izuku thinking of rigged encounters. Trust me, I won't. What was his luck, really? Household of Midoriya, late. Izuku, exhausted from the events of the day, moaned as he walked into the house and said, Mom, Himiko, I'm home. Izu. Himiko practically jumped on him from behind and dug her fangs into his neck. He simply responded by patting her head as he continued walking. She surprisingly finished fast and let go of him with a giggle. Yup. Far superior to spicy blood. Spicy? Izuku said. Ah, I understand now, as he saw Katsuki emerge from his room. What on earth have you been up to? I've been here all damn day waiting for your ass to get back because I thought we were going to do something, Katsuki said, settling down on the couch, as had Izuku and Himiko. I apologize for that. Izuku picked up the remote and confessed, I was trying to find that new hero game, but the stores ran out. He noticed several of his notebooks on the table, though, and said, you raided my room? Once more? What were you anticipating? Katsuki grabbed the remote control and remarked, you weren't here, and we were bored. You really are strangely well organized when it comes to your notebooks. I mean you have hero notes, support gear, even crime scenarios. Himiko remarked, recalling his enormous bookshelf, especially when it comes to hero stuff. Katsuki snarled in frustration, recalling that he had read some of those scenarios, some of which had considered ways that people could find themselves in precarious situations that could be used against him. Seriously, I think you're better than me when it comes to that. Izuku rubbed her head and purred as he said, maybe, but you're still top of the class. I'm sorry for being late, though. Positively, I believe I've made some new friends. Have you? That's fantastic, Himiko gave a cheer. They are aware of your quirklessness? Himiko scowled at Katsuki for his direct question, but Izuku just shrugged. Just one of them. It didn't come up with Kyoka, Izuku explained, to Katsuki's huffing reply. It's best not to tell them that I nearly got crushed saving one of them, he said, adding that he had always made sure that people were sincere when they tried to be friends with him. TCH. Katsuki said, I'll make sure they're not trying to do something behind your back. Toga grinned broadly and said, and if they are, I'll give them a nice, messy cut, while removing a kitchen knife from somewhere. Izuku said, you guys are so protective it's genuinely adorable. Himiko laughed happily, but Katsuki growled in embarrassment. I am not fucking cute, with considerable volume, Katsuki declared. Calmly, Izuku said, I have seen your baby pictures so I respectfully disagree. I have also seen yours, yeah, and I know I'm adorable. He's right. That All Might onesie makes him look adorable, Himiko exclaimed. I believe I have a copy of Katsuki. With Katsuki gasping, Izuku continued, from Auntie Mitsuki. Deku, do not dare. Izuku slammed a pillow into Katsuki's face and ran off, saying, oh no, I'm already gone. Himiko jumped after him, and the stunned Katsuki jumped to his feet. Inko, who was listening from outside with a big smile on her face and tears in her eyes, heard screaming and laughter filling the house. She was thrilled that Izuku was doing well, that he had friends, that he was doing well in school, that everything was going well. She was always worried that she had failed as a mother, especially after he was declared quirkless, but she was relieved to hear him laugh, so she went inside and was more than happy to be a part of it. Municipal Beach in Takoba, a week later. As he stood in front of the current location of where Izuku Midoriya had trained months prior to the UA entrance exam in order to build up his body in order to use the infamous quirk, One for All, Izuku muttered to himself, knew it was bad, but this is somehow worse than what I remember. Seriously, how does any of this go unnoticed? To be honest, I was disappointed because this beach was really nice before it was turned into a landfill, and everyone else seemed to agree. Alas, it wasn't really the reason he was here. Deku, why are all of us out here? Katsuki asked next to him. Recall the Endeavor altercation that happened the other day close to our regular location? Katsuki growled in response to Izuku's question. Yes, that flaming asshat used one of his moves to burn out some of the woods. How about it? Katsuki inquired. Well, they're still dealing with the damage there, but I tried going around there the other day. Izuku clarified, drawing a moan from Katsuki. That's why I was searching for quirk-permitted training locations. It might take weeks before they're finished. You chose the dump, too? What? Katsuki asked. Izuku felt bad about saying, I wouldn't need to if you actually considered going to quirk gyms. Katsuki glared at him. Hell no. Why in the world would I want to train at those sexiest places? If they won't let you in, they're not good for SHT. They would tell him it was because they were worried about distractions, but that was as fake as it got. Katsuki screamed, his rage evident as day. Izuku could only sigh at that, knowing he was right. I simply believe it would benefit you. Ignoring that, I know you wouldn't want me to leave you behind, so that's why I picked this place, Izuku explained, not missing Katsuki's snarl of retaliation. That way you can study different quirks and learn how to counter them in the future. One of the reasons is that there aren't any people outside of those jerks who shit here. What else is the cause? Katsuki inquired, his rage temporarily subdued. I've seen photos of this location before it was demolished. Before it became. Well, it was an actual beach that was breathtakingly beautiful. I reasoned that we could tidy up and restore its previous state. Izuku smiled broadly and said, after all, it's been overlooked long enough, and everyone deserves a chance to enjoy a place like this when it's at its best. Izuku gave the best explanation he could, but Katsuki snorted, what, it definitely hasn't done anything to deserve being left like. Well was I being corny? Katsuki shook his head and said, you were, but in the best possible way. He could tell there was probably more to it than that from the way he was speaking, but he didn't want to press the issue just yet. So, what? We simply relocate everything to a real dump here? No way. Izuku mentioned the open area that was big enough to put the trash there, saying, I intended on hiring a driver to take this stuff after we've moved it here. Do you really think you can afford that? What? Katsuki asked. Izuku shrugged and remarked, you'd be surprised with how cheap they are. We just need to keep it simple and efficient when doing so. Additionally, simply moving this stuff around will be beneficial strength training. Although Katsuki didn't notice Izuku abruptly turning away, he said, fine, at least we'll be here by ourselves. Deku. Katsuki frowned as Izuku confessed, well, I haven't asked anyone to join us, but I kinda want to. Who? I haven't even met those so-called friends yet. Since Kyoka and Raiko still had their own lives and didn't live nearby, Katsuki asked why he hadn't had the opportunity to meet them. You would if you actually joined the group chat, Izuku replied. With an eye roll in return, Katsuki said, I'll join when I actually meet them. Fine. Without saying another word, he pulled out his phone and started texting. After a few seconds of waiting, 2 dings sounded, and he turned to face Katsuki and said, congratulations, we have a playdate. Fuck. The next day, Kiyoshi Ward Shopping Mall. Fuck. You said that already. Fuck you. At least it's better. Izuku and Katsuki were waiting for Kyoka and Raiko to join them at the front of the hall. They were both wearing casual clothing once more, observing the approaching springtime. When will they arrive? What? Katsuki asked. Very soon. Kachan, try not to frown too much in the interim. He had been wearing one of Izuku's many named shirts, which currently read shirt, and he preferred it plain. Only when you stop wearing those stupid shirts, Deku. Ah, right. Izuku's friend gave him a bewildered look when he said, don't look down on a style you can't comprehend. The greenette merely sneered at the expression and looked around for his friends, which fortunately didn't take long, as he unexpectedly saw both of them coming from the same corner. Jiro, Usagiyama, come on over. I told you to call me Raiko, didn't I? As they got closer, Raiko said, really, it's easier. Izuku merely laughed, and Katsuki said nothing. So that's them. Katsuki glared at the two right away, and he would be lying if he claimed to genuinely trust them to be Izuku's friends. He would undoubtedly be evaluating their every move, word, and facial expression to determine whether or not they were deserving of being in their friend group. About time. Been waiting here for ages. Ignore him. Izuku ignored the frown and remarked, but really, I'm glad we could meet like this. He simply wants to make sure we get in line for any new hero merch. Kyoka spun her earjack and said simply, it's no issue, dude. Anyway, It was inevitable. This guy got a staring problem. Raiko said, catching Katsuki's fleeting glance, I'm just glad we could relax a little bit. The others exchanged glances before following Katsuki, who said, TCH, let's get going already. Katsuki continued and made his way to the entrance. Heroes Gala, Kiyoshi Ward Shopping Mall. Izuku and his friends had followed, but Katsuki ignored this, seeing what he wanted right away and grabbing it. Katsuki had gone directly to one of the many hero stores. Fucking finally. Izuku had managed to catch not one, but 2 copies of the game he had been hunting for, and he threw one of the copies to his friend, saying, Deku, catch. As they entered, Izuku said, don't throw stuff you haven't paid for. He caught it easily and turned to face Raiko, saying, looks like we can play together. Izuku hummed in agreement before turning to Kyoka. Raiko said, yeah, granted I'm a little ahead, but it shouldn't take you long to catch up. Would you like to search for a copy? Izuku asked, only to see her shake her head. He shrugged in understanding and moved to the counter with Katsuki. Not getting anything else? No need to. As they paid for the games, Katsuki proudly exclaimed, this is the newest game, and I'll be damned if I let you get ahead of me. Now, what next? I'm not going to waste my day, despite the extras. Any extras? Raiko and Kyoka both asked as Izuku pretended to cough. Isn't it clear? After visiting other shops in the arcade, we went to the food court. It was clear that a mall was a good place to hang out, so Izuku explained, maybe we can find one of those bootleg All Might movies to make fun of. Perhaps see if there's a movie theater in here. With Kyoka and Raiko nodding, Katsuki gave in, and Izuku could only smile as he took the lead this time. Fuck it, fine. Arcade, Kiyoshi Ward Shopping Mall. Enjoying yourself while catching up? With a smug smile on his face, Raiko asked. Fuck it. Every time. This shit is busted. Katsuki was furious and was punching buttons quickly and aggressively. Never gonna catch up. RAAAHHH. Do you think he's paying some attention to it? Kyoka looked at Katsuki and asked. Izuku told Kyoka, staring at him incredulously, no, this is him enjoying himself. Using Fat Gum as the well-known gaming icon, the Pac-Man of this universe says, he's getting angry at Gum Man. I've witnessed him go into full gamer rage before, so believe me when I say that. As they watched them play, Izuku acknowledged, this is pretty normal. Raiko couldn't help but tease Katsuki the entire time, as he repeatedly cursed, saying, wanna try something here? Like what? Kyoka asked, only to see him pointing behind her. She couldn't help but to give him a deadpan look. Really? Slammers for guitars? You know all it is just pressing colorful buttons on a screen, right? Said Guitar Hero, in case that wasn't obvious. Izuku looked away and said, oh, I didn't think that would be too difficult for you. Her eyes glared at him and she pointed her earjacks at him. Apologies. With a small smile on her face, Izuku said, I'm just saying, if you can't keep up then we can play something else. I know what you're doing, and I hate that it's working. Kyoka replied with a grumble. Fine, but after I beat you, we're hitting the music store. All right by me. As they headed to the game, Izuku warned them to get ready to get wrecked. Mal, Beats and Boxers Jam and Records, Kiyoshi Ward Shopping. Quite bluntly, Katsuki said, you got annihilated. Unsurprisingly, Kyoka was an expert in all things music related, so Izuku huffed. Yeah, I know. That's why I didn't even consider a bet. My wallet would have been depleted as a result. He pouted when Kyoka said, well, it's not my fault you were an easy opponent. She then gave him a playful elbow and said, ease up, that depressing look doesn't really fit your face. Glancing back at the sign, Raiko pondered, seriously, who names these places? Katsuki said angrily, who cares, either pick something or move on. Does the game still make you angry? I think he's still mad, Raiko said, grinning smugly at him. Katsuki scowled and walked stompingly through the store. Izuku shrugged and said, he'll get over it. He went to one of the shelves and looked around, saying, you know, I never got into music when I was younger. He couldn't, at least not without it being something about some random pro hero. Never mind how many of them are about All Might. You don't like him? Confused, Kyoka inquired. The biggest fan, but I do like variety. In addition, he missed his world's music terribly. Not even the songs composed for MHA had existed, and the only thing he could do was play back what he remembered. Kyoka picked one up and held it in his hand, saying, in that case. Try Deep Dope. I assure you that you will enjoy it. Izuku took the disc and remarked, then I guess I have no choice but to trust the Guitar Slammer's champ. You were fortunate. Without me, you'd be lost in a place like this, Kyoka continued, grinning. Raiko pushed past them and said, if you two are gonna flirt, at least do it where I don't have to gag. They both turned red, with Kyoka glaring straight into Raiko's back and Izuku looking away awkwardly. Raiko happily ignored this. Kyoka sighed as Izuku said, sorry about that. Dude, it's okay. Before she fell silent for a while, she asserted, he's just teasing. I think I'll teach him a lesson. As she slowly stalked after the rabbit, Izuku said, go crazy. Knowing that she could still hear him, he fought the urge to sigh once she was out of sight. Fuck. He didn't want to be lonely in any way, but he could hardly discuss these matters with anyone, not even Katsuki or his mother. Relationships, romantic ones, were a strange and difficult topic given his situation, not because of his quirkless nature, but because he was mentally much older, which made things like dates and the like difficult to think about given the significant difference between his physical and mental ages. Izuku managed to force a smile as he gazed down at the deep dope cover, thinking, and now I'm back to these issues, best put my thoughts elsewhere. These actually look good. It wasn't surprising at all that Jiro had taste. Food court. Kiyoshi Ward Shopping Mall. The group had finally calmed down and were lounging in the food court after hitting a few more stores and launching a final assault on the arcade. And I have to deal with my sister, Raiko said, looking through a particular notebook. You are officially the scariest person I know, Midoriya. With a disturbed yet intensely curious expression on her face, Kyoka continued, yeah, I didn't even think of any of this stuff. I'm not that horrible, am I? Come on. Wow. The honest truth comes out, Izuku said with hope, but the expression on his face told him otherwise. Katsuki nudged him and muttered, shut up, Deku. Izuku looked at Kacchan and said, right back at you, Kacchan. So, what's the deal with nickname in general? Kyoka glanced between the two and asked. Why does the Bomberanian continue to refer to us as extras? Raiko inquired as Katsuki's expression changed to one of bewilderment. What the devil do you think you're doing by calling that stupid jerk? Katsuki shouted, drawing some notice. What did you expect me to do when you called me an extra? Raiko asked, causing Katsuki to frown, and Izuku interrupted before he could say anything more. It was something from our childhood. With Katsuki huffing, Izuku explained, we gave each other nicknames because we couldn't say each other's names correctly. Looking fairly concerned, Kyoka trailed off, yeah, but doesn't Deku mean, yeah no. Useless. Yes, but it's not really the worst thing someone could say about me. I mean, can you imagine being called Kacchan at the playground? But in all seriousness, it's just something that has stuck, Izuku said, glaring at the enraged Katsuki. Raiko snorted, and Kyoka let a laugh slip out of her mouth. Of all people, he is aware that I am far from worthless. Katsuki growled and remarked, of course you're not useless, but I'll be damned if I'm gonna let you get ahead of me. All right. Who is now 2 points ahead? Izuku said, calm down, don't get yourself thrown out, as Katsuki growled and detonated a tiny explosion. Don't you two fight a lot? It wasn't much, but considering his brazen demeanor, it was the best she was going to get, Kyoka said, glaring at Katsuki, who glared back for a moment before huffing and mumbling an apology. More than you may imagine. Izuku ignored his friend's sidelong glance and said, gosh, we're actually trying out some more training and planning in advance for this summer. In fact, I was actually wondering if you wanted to train with us? Practicing? As a hero? Raiko said, making a concerted effort not to snort. On the whole. Plus, it's just something to do to hang out, Izuku continued, recalling some of their conversations, and you do like exercising, last I remembered. He did enjoy working out when he could, and he could use the extra time away from home. Well, my hangouts normally involve more game time, but I can't say I wouldn't mind some extra exercise. It was a habit, either from his quirk or something he just grew into. Okay, then, Midoriya. I have no problem accompanying you. Excellent, Jiro. How about you? Izuku turned to face the girl and asked. She was being honest when she said, I'm not sure if I can keep up with any of you dudes. She would be lying even after seeing the notes on her own quirk if she believed she was hero material. Well, that is not what I would say. To other people, I should definitely be unable to keep up with Katsuki. And I know for a fact that he doesn't hold back. Katsuki complained about that, but he didn't deny it. What was more shocking, to be honest, was that he didn't deny the idea of them training. To act in any other way is an insult. You also believe that I can manage Blasty over there? Kyoka pointed a jack at him and asked. Izuku shrugged, knowing she was more concerned about his quirk than her own, which made sense. Not at all, but that's only because I don't know how you fight yet. And if you think you're weak, then get stronger. By only considering the negatives and not just the heroics, you are limiting yourself. Do you want to try it with us? Kyoka couldn't help but agree with that. She had long sincerely wished to be a hero, but she had never really told anyone about it, not even her parents. Now that she was being given the chance to at least be given that opportunity, even though she still had some reservations, it was incredibly motivating to hear it from someone who didn't have a quirk and was still working extremely hard. Should I start pouting? Izuku inquired, his tone tinged with sarcasm. Kyoka smiled and then sighed, saying, please don't. All right, I suppose it wouldn't hurt. Green, don't expect me to deviate too much from my own schedule. Everything is fine as long as you don't mind a little more work. With a broad smile that chilled everyone, including Katsuki, who was aware of how extra his friend could be during training, Izuku said. The weights were visible to him. He was unable to lift the weights, but Izuku was already discussing the purchase of new weights. With a blank expression, Katsuki said, you better be ready to deal with his bullshit like I am. He saw their faces light up with regret, while Izuku just gave him a frustrated look. What? We might as well let them know that this situation won't be simple. I'll gladly leave them in the dust if they fall behind. Is that difficult, Bomberanian? Exercise is always going to be a pain, so no complaints here, Raiko said, rolling his eyes as he received a snort in response. We might as well finish it. In any case, where is this training location? Kyoka inquired. Izuku replied, oh, it's Takoba Municipal's beach. The dump? Kyoka and Raiko both inquired. Seeing their faces, Izuku could only nod and chuckle a little. That shouldn't be a problem, right? Takoba Municipal Beach, sunset, after school. Izuku had to admit that even he didn't think they'd agree so easily, and he knew that if he followed that American dream plan that All Might had originally created, albeit with a few changes, they could easily finish this in a few months. Raiko and I were moving around, pulling around the heavier items, like old refrigerators, car parts, etc., while Kyoka and Katsuki were concentrating on other things. Katsuki had gone all out of the garbage, blowing them into the smallest particles of dust, and when he wasn't, he was also moving around some large pieces of garbage. Kyoka, on the other hand, was concentrating on using her jacks to lift things or pounding metal trash chunks. It was as productive as it could be, given that they were all working in a small space. Even if one of the officers had complained about Katsuki's explosions, he was fired after seeing the sign indicating that it was a quirk training ground. He did, however, glance at Izuku for it without saying anything. As she sat on the ground, exhausted, Kyoka said, fuck. This sucks. She couldn't help but glare up at the boys, who were also exhausted, but not nearly as much as she was. You should have expected this shit, ears. You agreed to it. Katsuki grunted and held out a limb. Less complaining over there, ears. Raiko glared at him after admitting, you definitely went harder than I thought you could go. What? It was a compliment. Though she wasn't naive, Kyoka acknowledged that this was her first time doing this and said, yeah, sure. Despite this, she kind of wished she had done a little better. Still, it's a little rough, and the smell isn't much better. With his nose wriggling slightly, Raiko muttered, trust me, it's much worse for me. Raiko's ear twitched as Katsuki said, deal with it, hair fucker. He turned away from him and a frown formed on his face before saying, Deku. Well? What? Looking up from his laptop, Izuku muttered, is something wrong? Izuku blinked, looked at his offhand, and realized he had brought a weight with him. He let out an embarrassed chuckle, lowered the weight, and tried his best to ignore their looks. We just got done for the day, put down that stupid-ass weight. Katsuki growled. It's somewhat of a routine. TCH, you say that shit until you crash and pass out, Katsuki replied. Wait, you've fainted from too much exercise before? With concern, Raiko asked. No, not lately. Much more so when I was younger, Izuku acknowledged, recalling how hard he had pushed himself to train. He needed everything he could for his trip to UA. What precisely are you doing there, then? Leaning slightly to see what he was doing, Kyoka inquired, wait, is that a chat box? Izuku confirmed, yup. Oh, I see. Aren't you using those nerds? Raiko and Kyoka were confused when Katsuki asked. Remember that we're nerds, Katsuki? But yeah, I'm talking to them again, Izuku said, drawing a chuckle from Katsuki. And the reason you're speaking with them is? Raiko inquired. Because the internet is for idiots. What? All right, let me explain. You are aware that there are a great number of people with intelligent enhancing quirks. Izuku rubbed the back of his head and confessed, "Well, I've kind of been tricking them into teaching me how to make certain things." "Are you sure that's legal?" Kyoka inquired in concern. "I think so. It's as simple as posing a typical online query. Ignore the desire these people have to brag about their intelligence." Izuku returned his attention to the computer and stated, "Anyway, I've just been using them to cycle through support items for myself and Kachin here. It's surprising that they don't give me any ego most of the time, though I ran into a few." Izuku had stolen the idea of shotgun gauntlets for Katsuki to use, and Katsuki explained with a sly smile, "Deku's already designed a few things, even these gauntlets for me to use normally, so whenever I punch, I can have a more focused explosion. Then again, I made these big-ass gauntlets that can store up my sweat in large amounts for me to release a big-ass explosion." Katsuki could admit that he knew what he wanted. Raiko stated bluntly, "I keep forgetting how nasty your quirk is." "Stop talking, jerk." Izuku was trying hard to maintain the biggest smile on his face while looking between them, and Kyoka moaned, "Gosh, you too. What's with that grin, green?" He didn't succeed. The only person who could relate to that was Katsuki, who softened his expression slightly and said, "It's nice to have a hangout with more people, that's all. It's nothing, I guess, I'm just a little happy, that's all." TCH. Katsuki gave the two new friends a stern look and said, "If you want to leave, you better do it now or get with the program. You losers better keep up with both of us, regardless if you're trying to be a hero or not. So long as we're doing something beyond training in a junkyard." Raiko replied with a scowl. Believe it or not, there are better ways of hanging out. There had better be. Still exhausted from the day, Kyoka managed to exit, saying, "I honestly don't even know if I can get back home or not. But yeah, I wouldn't mind doing this again. If I faint on you, just relax." Izuku couldn't help but smile, saying, "I'm glad to hear that." He hoped the friendship would only get stronger from here. "Next time we hang out, I'll even bring Himiko along. Even so, she might occasionally be a bit extra." "What, comparatively speaking to Blasty here? I don't think so," Kyoka teasingly said to Katsuki. Katsuki yelled, "Of course. Like a lot." 2 months later, at Takoba Municipal Beach Park. Izuku had been more productive than he had anticipated over the last 2 months. In addition to the beach, we also continued to get to know Raiko and Kyoka. Katsuki didn't even whine about them, which was the best part. The fact that Raiko was related to Maruko was more than he had anticipated. In addition to Rumi, Raiko had 8 other siblings, 5 of whom were born to different mothers and one father. The rabbit quirk was created by the man himself. It was a polymorphic relationship, which was uncommon in both the original MHA universe and Rukido's. But things were a little different here. Sometimes people wanted to start a quirk marriage by combining a particular quirk with another or salvaging it. In other cases, though, people would take on several partners in an effort to spread the use of another quirk. Most of the time, this was done for power and profit. It was anything but that in the Usagiyama case. Returning to Raiko, he had gradually disclosed some aspects of himself. He loved games, of course, but he also worked out as much as he could, which helped him stay up with the crazy training schedule. His continued lack of interest in becoming a hero irritated Katsuki, but the friend's explosion didn't make the situation worse. It was true that the man was sassy, but he was also amiable. Unless it was a game, he had none of Miriko's battle-hungry instincts. In that sense, he was a perfectionist. She was nearly identical to her canon self when she moved into Kyoka. By default, she was practical and enthusiastic, blunt and teasing, but she reserved that for people she found annoying or just for fun. She would use her earphone jacks to stab you if you were angry enough. She was undoubtedly one of the friendliest people you would ever meet, even with all of that. To his surprise, Kyoka acknowledged that she owned some rock music and shared her parents' strong interest in it. It still made her feel more than ashamed. But to Katsuki's increasing annoyance, both had something in common. "Come on, it'll just be for a few short sessions," Izuku begged. "No, it'll be really good for you though, it's fine if they don't accept me inside." "Pass. I get enough lessons at home. Can you please look past this whole thing for me?" "No, plus. Fuck you." Izuku ignored Katsuki's arrogant look and moaned into his hands. No, not only him, but also Raiko and Kyoka. He was attempting to persuade them to enroll in fighting classes or even quirk gym. However, Izuku's friends had refused to enter any of them since he was rejected by almost everyone in the area because of his quirkless personality. Rukido did not teach fighting, he worked in an office. He got all of his knowledge from watching TV, reading books and comics, or simply happened upon a random video. Katsuki angrily asserted, I figured out my own style by myself and from fighting you bastards constantly. Besides, I don't want to do that wash on shit you were going on about. With a faint growl, Izuku clarified, it is wax on, wax on. It helps with circle punches and kicks away from you. He wasn't going to treat Mr. Miyagi disrespectfully, even though Katsuki was his best friend. When he saw their faces, he paused and moaned. Son of a, that doesn't mean anything. It's just some random bit of info I came across. Raiko shivered after asking dryly, and your rigorous training exercise makes me wonder if you're a demon sent from hell? Izuku received training that was unique and inhuman. Seriously, I'm enhanced thanks to my quirk, yet somehow you've terrified the fuck out of me with how you train. And somehow you're not bulked up All Might's large ass. With a shrug, Izuku finally looked out at the beach and asked, everybody is different, what do you want me to say? Honestly, we've made a lot of good progress. As they came into his line of sight, Kyoka remarked, I'll say, we can actually walk around easier. Since there were 4 people working when they could, it wasn't really that difficult. This was primarily exploited by Izuku, which compelled Katsuki to follow suit, which thanks to Green here. And fucking me, as Kyoka continued, Katsuki snarled, yes, and fucking you. This place is actually looking pretty decent. I bet we'll be done by the end of summer. Raiko made a small joke before pulling out his game, saying, it is pretty nice here. Shame we won't get that much credit for it beyond a handshake. Then again, that might be too much. Izuku looked at everything and hummed, who cares? The sight alone makes it worth it. As he looked up from his game for a moment, Raiko acknowledged, good point. Katsuki muttered, TCH, it's a decent training spot, that's all. He was sighed looking into the distance despite what he was saying, and then he growled. This place is going to look damn amazing when I'm done with it. Kyoka corrected, when we're done with it, Bomberamian. If she wasn't receiving credit, she would be furious. Katsuki sneered, I know what I said, ears. Before taking a breath and calming down, Kyoka appeared ready to poke him. Whatever, we're finished for the week, so what are we doing? Kyoka responded. Izuku mentioned grabbing their attention and said, in that case I say we take a night around town. Raiko snorted, a night around town? Sounds like you want to celebrate. Izuku remarked, and why not? Look at this place, in reference to the beach. It may not be finished, but considering we couldn't even see the sand back then, I say this is a massive improvement. Katsuki agreed, albeit crudely, that Deku has a point. We deserve a damn good reward for what we've done. The argument was difficult. They could still reward themselves for doing this even if they weren't receiving any compensation for it. Raiko shrugged and said, not like I mind. Although he was in good company, he didn't really go out to do things like explore the town. Privality said, just gotta clear it with the folks. Kyoka continued, same, but I know Mom wouldn't mind. Her mother was able to control her troublesome father with ease. Observing the enthusiasm in their eyes, Izuku remarked, then we have a plan. He was feeling it, even at his advanced age. I'll even bring Himiko along. She deserves her own night out. Isn't she taking the summer to study for next year? Yeah, she needs it. Kyoka murmured. Then, full of excitement, they talked about the specifics of the evening. Oh, to be young once more. It's time to enjoy yourself, Kiryu style. Japan, Musutafu. The next night, the group had gathered at the prearranged time and with each parent's consent. Izuku had picked out a dark green dress shirt, black slacks, and dress shoes, and he was headed there. Wearing a navy blue jacket, white heels, a black blouse and matching skirt, and her glasses, Himiko maintained a casual look. Although he should invest in other colors in the future, he felt that this straightforward style was the one that best fit him. Thanks for inviting me out again, Zuzu, Himiko exclaimed as she walked and twirled. Izuku was the class leader at first, trading it with Katsuki every so often, but Himiko had easily risen to the top and remained there. Think of it as a gift for pretty much being the top of the school. Even now you're working hard despite the break. It was beneficial that the school itself wouldn't have to worry about prejudice because of the well-known scandal involving her family. And it's my treat if you want anything while we're out. Really? Yes. Himiko embraced him tightly and glomped on him. Best brother ever. They saw Katsuki ahead, dressed in a red, All Might, shirt, brown slacks, a black leather jacket, and the recognizable blue and yellow All Might sneakers. I try. They stared at Katsuki as he growled, there you fucks are, you're late. Izuku deadpanned, Katsuki, we're here 15 minutes early. Himiko nodded. Ha! I've been waiting longer, exclaimed Katsuki, who had been 30 minutes ahead of schedule. And look at that, you actually didn't use one of those stupid gag shirts. Izuku glared narrowly and said, "Don't disrespect my style, Katsuki." In return, he received a smug grin. Cheeky brat. He would have continued, but he saw Kyoka approaching. Her outfit consisted of a black vest, a long purple shirt, slightly torn blue jeans, and black boots. "Hey Ajiro, you look cooler than Kachan." "Oh, go eat shit and die, eat shit and live." As she came closer, Kyoka could only shake her head. "Well, at least I'm not the only one who came early." Himiko yelled, "Jiro," and embraced the girl tightly. She patted her head even though she blushed naturally from the loving girl. As the girl released her hold, Kyoka remarked, "Good to see you too, Himiko. It's been a minute, that's for sure." She would have told their school, right? "Gah, I wished we went to your school," but she genuinely detested it there. Regardless of how phony it was, at least they were trying to be kind. Then at least we wouldn't have to sit on the roof. Kyoka laughed and said, "Unfortunately, mine isn't much better. Anyone see Usagiyama on the way here?" They all turned to see their rabbit friend standing in a corner, and he said, "Didn't I tell you people to call me Raiko?" He had on a white suit, black dress shoes, and a yellow dress shirt. In fact, his ears protruded from the top of a white fedora. "Honestly, what? Somehow you look more smug than usual." "It's the hat." Izuku snapped his fingers in agreement. Katsuki rolled his eyes and agreed, "Definitely the hat." With great delight, Himiko exclaimed, "Add a feather and it'll be perfect." Katsuki remarked, "Then he'd be smug and asinine." "I like how it looks on me." Raiko shrugged, his ears wriggling slightly. "Can we go already?" As they headed to their first destination, Izuku said, "Of course. You're gonna love what I've thought of. Bowling. Die." The bowling ball sped past the pins that were in Katsuki's path and down the alley. Raiko simply passed him with his own bowling ball in hand, letting out a drab "die" before rolling the ball. "Strike. Yes. Suck it, hair fucker," he exclaimed. Despite its extremely slow motion, it managed to topple each pin. Then, smugly, he turned to face Katsuki. "Grr. We're just getting started." Raiko passed a ball to her, which she eagerly grasped, and said, "Right, wait till your turn, Bombarian, Himiko." With a cheer, Himiko declared, "I got this." Then she let go after pulling the ball back. To her annoyance, it hit some but not all. "Aw." Izuku reminded her, "You got another shot, go for it, Himi." "Right, I got it." Himiko made another attempt and succeeded in obtaining the final few. She raised a fist in the air and cheered. Izuku stepped up and said, "My go." He scowled as he rubbed his arm after going twice with some pins left up. "Dang it." Knowing that he was pumping some iron before leaving, Kyoka said, "Step aside, Green. Gotta let that arm relax." Using her ear jacks, she lifted a bowling ball and rolled it out as forcefully as she could. It hit the pins so forcefully that they exploded all over, and that's a strike for me. Izuku moaned, "Damn it, I must be out of practice." Months before Rukido died and returned to this world, he had gone bowling for the last time. In spite of this, he briefly slapped his cheeks before a determined expression appeared on his face. "It doesn't matter, the game's just getting started." He was severely defeated. Darts, before throwing them, Kyoka had gone first, thrilling 2 darts with her jacks and hitting them near the center but not quite there. Next, Katsuki threw with all of his strength, but to his embarrassment, he missed and hit the ceiling. Next was Raiko, who at least hit the board with his throw, albeit a little higher than intended. Himiko went next, holding multiple darts simultaneously before putting them all in, and she giggled. She hit the center with 6 consecutive hits, demonstrating her terrifying accuracy. Izuku took the next turn, shocking them by hitting 1 dart dead center, then repeating the sequence, using the subsequent dart to break through each of the preceding ones. "I think I overdid it, you think? Capturing fish?" After seeing the big tub of fish swimming around, Izuku remarked, "I thought this was only a festival thing." The game owner asserted, "I like being unique." "Fair enough. Get in the fucking net, damn it," snarled Katsuki, who was unsuccessful in catching it. "Maybe if you didn't yell at them like they were presented with a shit dish, they would consider it," Raiko grumbled. "I don't know, maybe it's from how ugly he looks," Kyoka responded. Katsuki shouted, "Fuck you both," and then swiped downward. There was only 1 fish in his net when it was recovered. "Huh? Gotcha, y'all little fucker. I'm gonna grill you when I get home." The owner coughed into his fist and muttered, "He's not taking that fish. Anyone else wanna give it a shot?" Izuku picked up a net and shrugged, saying, "Sure, why not?" As he got close to the tub and was about to enter, a fish jumped in his net. Eh? Before he could finish, a number of additional fish jumped in, followed by the one that Katsuki caught, much to their surprise. Eh? With an angry glare at the fish that had deceived him, Katsuki exclaimed, "Why you fucking traitor?" There probably would have been more, but at the moment, Himiko's cat-like eyes were frightening the ones that were left. Raiko gave her an odd look and stepped back, saying, "I think you're scaring them." Huh? Himiko asked, turning to face him as he perspired, her cat-like face remaining unwavering. "Never mind. Grand Noodles by Mighty." Raiko muttered incredulously, "Seriously, who comes up with these names?" As they sat at a table, Izuku explained, "The food is to die for, but the name may be a little bad. We came here ever since we were 4 and it's been the best way to get back our energy." After deciding on everyone's meal at the beginning, Katsuki yelled, "Hey! 1 spicy steak and pork curry ramen. 1 ramen with chicken and soy for Deku. Get the hair bastard here udon stir-fired with extra carrots. Ears gets miso ramen with extra bits of shrimp with hers, alongside a plate of dango for Fangs." The worst part was that since it was exactly what they wanted, neither Raiko nor Kyoka could object. "Yay! Dango!" exclaimed Himiko. Kyoka was unable to finish when Himiko decided to bite Izuku's neck. "Is that gonna be enough to fill you?" Right." Izuku patted her ears and got purrs in return. "She'll be fine. If she could survive on just my blood alone, she would." As Izuku, Himiko, and Katsuki started going through their food, they waited for it to arrive. Kyoka asked, "Is it that good?" before biting into it herself. Just by the taste, she couldn't help but hum cheerfully to herself. Raiko just sniffed and said, "Everyone, forgive me for what you're about to see." Like the others, he jumped right in with greed. By the time they were finished, they were fully satisfied. This remains our secret. Before requesting seconds, everyone gave a unanimous nod. Karaoke Kyoka yelled, Hey, I didn't say I wanted to sing," as Izuku shoved her up on stage. Izuku agreed to sing for them, but he had wanted Kyoka to follow him immediately after they had secured a karaoke booth for themselves. Besides, you sang well enough." It was true that she occasionally sang for a short while after training was over, but she said, "But I'm not you. I've heard you sing a few times, briefly, but your voice blows me out of the water by a mile. But I want to hear the real deal." But she interrupted herself when she noticed his smile, which caused her to blush a little. Fine. But don't expect this to happen every time." With a slight flutter, Rukido asserted, "I can dream." After pushing him away and rolling her eyes, she reached for the microphone. She could at least sing something a little simpler, but there weren't many options for her rock and roll tastes here. It was different for someone with innate talent, even if it seemed straightforward to others. Kyoka sang okay, and to be honest, it was lovely. In an instant, she could transition from a rock and roll show to a gentle solo performance. Her voice captivated everyone, including Katsuki. Izuku, who found today to be similar to his previous life, was only able to close his eyes and enjoy the song. After finishing, Kyoka opened her eyes to observe their response, and Himiko immediately glomped on her. "That was amazing," Himiko exclaimed as she gave the flushed girl a firm embrace. Raiko acknowledged, "She's right, I knew you could sing, but, damn." Looking away, Katsuki asserted, it was all right." Izuku gave him a hard elbow that caused him to flinch and then growl. "Fine, it was great, happy?" Izuku added to the girl's embarrassment by claiming, after that performance, elated, "I wouldn't mind hearing another one." Kyoka scoffed and did her best not to smile, as if, not surprisingly, she failed. Streets, Musutafu overall, they had had a surprisingly pleasant evening. It said a lot that even Katsuki publicly acknowledged this. They all needed this personal time in between training, school, and studying. Himiko pouted and complained, "I still don't understand why you told me to put it back." She was addressing Izuku. Izuku said in a firm tone, glaring back at the poor fool who had attempted to sell them, because Uno destroys friendships and families. Neither of which I would wish on any of us. Raiko looked at Katsuki and said, "Do we want to know?" He explained, his face expressionless. Him and the old hag didn't speak to each other for over a month. It was such an uncomfortable moment. Uno has been banned from game night ever since. Izuku looked away to make sure he didn't give in as Himiko pouted about it. Now that his younger sister was in charge of him, he needed to focus on something else. They were drawn to the sound of a scream at that precise moment. "Thief! Thief! Somebody stop him, call a hero." Really? Izuku twitched his eyes in thought. With the knife-like fingers protruding from his gloves and his clumsy grip on the stolen purse, the criminal appeared as normal as possible. Mind if I? Raiko nodded and said, go for it. Izuku agreed, moved in front of the thief, and then Spartan kicked him in the stomach. The purse flew into the man's hand and he flew on his back. Raiko's single kick stopped the robber's snarling as he looked up and lunged at him with his knives pointed outward. Whining, the man crashed into a wall and collapsed. Raiko, a little irritated by the complaining, remarked, "TCH, punk." Izuku walked back towards the crowd with the purse held up and said, all right, I'll just go return this. You just keep him here until the police arrive. We caught the thief. Whose purse is this? Izuku was doing that when the criminal groaned and stood up. A knife pressed against his balls as he snarled and attempted to stand up. Eep. Himiko said, so, you tried to stab my big brother, with a sparkle in her eye. Whimpering, the man sought assistance. Try anything and I'll blast your ass so hard, you'll turn the moon cherry red, warned Katsuki. Thinking back to some of the ingenious dangers Izuku had developed over the years. He had no idea where Izuku got any of that knowledge, but damn if it wasn't useful. Raiko and Kyoka stared at the crook blankly as they unwittingly had the same thought, and the crook could only weep aloud. Considering their appearance, who is going to believe that this man is a criminal? Later, Kyoka glared at Himiko and Katsuki and said, you're lucky there were people able to identify the thief from you too. It's the officer's fault for thinking I was a fucking villain. Me, Katsuki screamed. With a pause before continuing, Raiko stated bluntly, I don't know, you look like a feral dog when your face looks like that. Then again you always look like that. Must suck. Suck a carrot, hair fucker. Himiko laughed as Izuku asked, where did you hide that knife? Himiko said, don't worry about that. It's my little secret, and he started to perspire. All right, Izuku patted her head and said, just make sure that you use it safely. He pulled out his phone, looked at the time, and then swore. Oh boy, best we call it here, it's getting late. Katsuki snarled and strode off, saying, damn it, I have to go with Dad and the old hag in the morning. See you later, nerds. Everyone snorted when Raiko growled, hear that Kyoka? We've been promoted from extras to nerds. I gotta get going myself. See ya. Kyoka said, I gotta go too. It was a great night, as they began to head back home. Izuku started to say, guess we better hey, but was cut off when Himiko jumped on his back and giggled. You want a piggyback ride? Simply put, Himiko remarked, I never had one before. Izuku screamed, okay, hold on tight. Shifting into maximum overdrive, and then he began running more quickly than she had anticipated. Both of her siblings burst out laughing as she let out a joyful shriek. Overall, it was a pleasant evening, after 3 years, at Aldera High School. The teacher started holding printouts of his students' preferred life courses and said, now I know that I'm supposed to go over your futures as we enter our final year together. However, then, with a knowing look, he tossed them into the air. We all know you want to be heroes. As they freely used their quirks, the classroom erupted in cheers. They ignored him despite the teacher's attempts to soothe them. He simply shrugged, indifferent to the mayhem. He simply observed that most heroes were enthusiastic. For everyone to hear, Katsuki declared, don't put me in the same group as the rest of these extras. The glares he received for it didn't matter to him. Though he had a noticeable amount of stubble growing on his chin, he had not changed much, growing taller with his body. They ain't got nothing next to me. Izuku said, easy there, your ego is showing. From a great distance. He had begun to display a lot more muscle on his body, and his hair had grown out enough that Himiko could tie the back into a ponytail. He resembled a certain star-spangled man in build, if his guess was correct. The teacher gulped when he sensed that someone was watching him. Stop disrupting class, Midoriya, or else you can stay once the day is over. Himiko said, what was that sensei, in the rear? Her own hair was pulled back into a flawless ponytail, and the boys in the room were taking notice of her naturally growing body. Unfortunately for them, they had been frozen in place by a single glance in their direction. You want to see me after class? The teacher moaned, his eyes twitching at the finally audible snickers, and no, I was referring to Nevermind. He chose to mention the most well-liked of them in order to deflect attention from himself. Anyway, it's hardly shocking at all that Katsuki is going to the UA Nevermind Himiko as well. Of course he's going to the best hero school. I couldn't even begin to understand that exam. Himiko did too. I'm going to be the best of the best, and getting through UA is going to be another step in becoming the #1 hero," Katsuki declared with conviction. Himiko winked and said, "Heh heh, I'm only going in for the general course." Izuku told her that she had the potential to be a great hero, but she knew she didn't want that. "You're looking at Himiko Midoriya, future ace attorney at law." Missing the glances directed at him, the teacher remarked, of course, we did ensure you two had the best." The instructor then spoke in a bored tone, scowling and then letting out a sigh. "Oh right, you applied for UA too, Izuku Midoriya. For the hero course too." The quirkless boy in the back caught everyone's attention, but he just gave his teacher a sardonic look. Ever since he corrected the class on quirk evolution theory, Guy has been working against him. Actually, several times. Naturally, his teacher also thought less of quirkless people, even bringing it up in a lecture. The fact that he had the support of the other students and could readily deny it was the only reason he was never in trouble. Loser. Seriously? How can he be this delusional? His sister has a better chance at getting into the hero course. Anyone does, so long as they actually have a quirk. But Midoriya doesn't. That's the joke, and so is he. To correct it. Losers. With utter boredom in his voice, the teacher said, Now, quiet class." He was even able to ignore Himiko and Katsuki's combined glare. "Ignore Mr. Midoriya and enjoy the rest of class. You all have bright futures to look forward to." As the class did just that, the teacher turned away and started looking at his phone. Himiko contemplated whether it would be worthwhile to seize her knife. Katsuki was snarling, but he was more irritated than homicidal. They turned back to watch Izuku's response and discovered that he had one of his notebooks out and was typing on his laptop. It was fortunate that he didn't appear to be at all put off by what the teacher had tried. If only they could discover what was on his mind. Today is the date. Today must be fucking. Izuku's thoughts were racing through his head. The talk. The mood. It was the day of MHA's shocking statement. Izuku's encounter with All Might. The day the sludge villain kidnapped Katsuki. The day Izuku made every effort to save him. Izuku Midoriya had been offered his quirk, one for all, by All Might on that day. Could everything be the same, though? Was he hoping for uniformity? How on earth was he going to act? After school, he could worry about all of that. After school, oh no, that was too quick. Katsuki grew impatient and exclaimed, "Hey, stop spacing out and let's get going, nerd." Izuku closed his laptop and apologized. Oh right, sorry. But he didn't miss the looks his friends gave him. "What's up?" With reasonable concern, Himiko questioned, "You're not bothered by what the rest of the class has been saying, are right?" Even Katsuki's glare softened for a second before returning with a vengeance. "Whoa, should I take care of that today?" Izuku twitched his eyes in thought. Lying was not an option because they were both at the stage where they could detect when something was amiss. The truth was, for the most part. Guess I have an off feeling about today. Not sure if that's a good or bad thing yet. After a moment, Katsuki said, "TCH, don't worry about stupid things like that. Make it your damn day and fuck everything negative that tires to turn it bad." Old hag said putting that shit into the universe is bad. At that, Izuku could only blink. It was the same advice he had received from his own mother, not because it was bad advice. The mother of Rukido. Izuku turned his bag over and left the room, saying, "Hey, it's good advice from what I'm hearing. I'll take it to heart, now let's get going." Himiko giggled as Katsuki muttered, "Stupid, what do you think I was telling you?" Feeling much better than before, Izuku laughed. "It really doesn't matter how it turns out, I suppose. If it occurs, then it does. If not, then everything will be okay." Izuku thought as they helped him relax. He would still be prepared, though. He had to be. Streets, Musutafu, Japan. After leaving their high school, Izuku and Katsuki swiftly caught up on the most recent hero news. For amusement and reference, Himiko was reading up on past court cases. Izuku got the news he had been anticipating as they cautiously navigated through. They were drawn to Izuku's question, All Might last seen chasing after sludge-like villain in Musutafu? All Might's here. And he's kicking ass. Katsuki smiled with exuberance that was out of the ordinary. Izuku snorted and Katsuki gave him a disgusted look when Himiko added, chasing ass by the sound of it. As Katsuki tried not to gag, he commanded, "That's nasty to think about. Don't put those kinds of images in my head." "Sorry, Kat-chan, and stop using that nickname." "Never." Izuku was unable to contain his laughter at the two. He was simultaneously keeping a close watch on the sludge villain. If he had one thing to avoid, it would be Himiko or Katsuki being apprehended by the jerk. Having said that, everyone should have caught him by now. The news is simply taking a while to update. Then he saw the alley where Izuku had first encountered the sludge villain. Whoa! What was he going to do about this? It was Katsuki's desire to see All Might. Heck, he even desired to. He did not want any of them around in case the villain caught them. Were they prepared? Maybe. Just in case, he had an insurance tool with him. Izuku occasionally looked back and in the direction of the manholes as they crossed the street. Being cunning, the sludge villain would probably use anyone to ensure his escape. When he saw that they were going down the darkest of alleys, he knew they had to turn around. However, how? Katsuki looked down at his phone and screamed, "Fuck!" To their surprise. The hag wants me to pick up some bullshit from the market. Lazy ass. As Katsuki snarled, Himiko said, "Oh, I wanted to pick up some stuff for dinner. Thanks, Kat-chan." "Thanks." Then she looked at him. "You don't have to wait for me, Izu. I don't want to keep you waiting." Along with Himiko, Katsuki commanded, "If you see All Might, make sure to get me an autograph," and they headed off in the opposite direction. What happened just now? Izuku pondered incredulously. He saw the manhole tremble a little and heard a noise coming from down the alleyway. He steeled himself and considered his options before descending it. It's impossible to predict what this creep will do to other people, even if they get their way. One of the heroes would be able to intervene before things got out of hand if I could actually lead him out into the open. In addition, he was eager to show off his little trick. Before the sound of quick footsteps could be heard from ahead, he moved into the alley, keeping his eyes on the manhole as he passed. A long arm tried to grab him, but he was able to duck under it by snapping his head around. He stepped back and noticed a man wearing spandex that was black and white. Without hesitation, Izuku drew a taser from behind and pressed it into the man's extended arm, saying, "Foolish hostage. How dare you?" He instantly passed out, twitching in agony as he fell to the ground. Izuku turned off the taser and muttered to himself, that would have been really awkward if his quirk was rubber-based. At that moment, he heard footsteps approaching as quickly as the wind. "Have no fear. No way. For I am. H here?" All Might's booming voice became normal as he halted awkwardly. Despite having a radio in his pocket, he was dressed casually, like Cannon. After noticing his taser, he nodded in recognition. "I see you dealt with this criminal. No doubt to defend yourself, young man. Well done." As Izuku put it away, he acknowledged, "It was nothing special, shouldn't you?" Saying, "Oh, right." All Might produced a pair of handcuffs from behind him. As the cuffs abruptly widened and encircled the man's hands, he took him into custody. "No more arm swinging for you." Izuku blinked and then shook his head, saying, "Hey," his voice sounds like it's in bold text. With haste, he offered his own notebook and several extras. "Can I have your autograph, sir? If you have the time, that is." Well, of course. He suddenly produced a pen and joyfully signed each one. And who might I be making this out to? She would probably want one as well. One is for a friend of mine, Katsuki Bakugo, and another for Kyokajiro. Himiko wasn't interested, and Corvus probably wouldn't be. As for me, Izuku Midoriya. We're going to UA next year and going straight for the hero course. All Might quickly wrote down the names and remarked, "Ha ha ha, going straight for the gold, huh? Well, you already caught your first bad guy. Even if I'll have to write it down as self-defense." Before recalling, Izuku asserted, "That's fine, I don't really care about that stuff." "Wait, shouldn't you be after the sludge villain?" "Young Midoriya, don't worry," All Might said, taking out his radio. "My fellow heroes have already been informed of his presence and are chasing after him as well. He will not get away." If he remembered who was around here, that was hardly comforting if he was telling the truth. All Might said, "But I should get this one to the wagon before he wakes up." Izuku's eyes widened. Izuku needed to hear the scene, even if Rukido knew it by heart. To All Might's slight surprise, Izuku said firmly, "Hold it. There's something I need to ask, and if I don't do it now it'll bother me later. Can someone become a hero without a quirk?" The words, "without a quirk you say," were understood by All Might. Before he spoke, he appeared silent for a while. "In this line of work, as heroes are always putting our lives in the line. There are many risks when it comes to the job, and without a proper means to defend yourself, you may risk your life along with the people you try and protect." He forced himself not to reprimand the hero, telling himself to wait for him to finish. All Might thundered, "However, do I think you need a quirk to become a hero?" "Absolutely not." Which caused Izuku to flinch. Heroes are defined by a grand measure of things, but their quirk is not one of them. I know plenty of heroes who cannot rely on their quirk alone in order to get the job done. A quirk will always be a helpful tool, but a tool it is all the same. A true hero is born through their merit, by how far they put their time and energy into making themselves into the hero they inspire to become. Consider him taken aback. It was so much better to hear an All Might motivational speech live rather than on a screen. Izuku nodded instinctively as All Might asked, I take it you are quirkless yourself? Have no fear then. I can tell just by looking at you that you've put in that hard work I speak of. That being said, keep up with what you're doing. UA is going to be harsh for you and your friends after all, but keep your head held high and make sure to always go beyond. Izuku laughed and All Might sulked as he said, plus ultra. The hero coughed after saying, hey, I wanted to say that. Forget you heard that. He refused. Dork. All Might declined his walkie-talkie and said, update on the sludge villain. Last seen in Tokyo, Japan. All Might said, and that would be my cue to leave, as he picked up the swollen criminal. I'll drop this one off along the way. Until next time we meet, young Midoriya. The villain screamed silently the entire time as they leapt off with a single keep. In the meantime, Izuku couldn't help but feel, to be honest, fantastic. All Might encouraged his dream, even though he had been braced to hear him essentially rejected. The only thing that could stop him from becoming a hero was to hear from All Might. It was wonderful. Kacchan is gonna be so jealous. With Katsuki and Himiko. Katsuki turned and snarled, damn hag, couldn't be bothered to get this shit herself. While carrying a bag. They began to walk home, Himiko unable to contain his laughter at his clothes. And when All Might's in town, what are the fucking chances? While Katsuki could only snarl, Himiko teased, do you want that answer? Despite his incessant smack talk about it, she couldn't help but poke and tease him. He obviously enjoyed it. Shut it, Fang's eye. Katsuki quickly came to a halt after snagging something behind them. Move. For Himiko, the next few seconds passed quickly. She was first shoved aside by Katsuki. From what? I mean, living sludge. Katsuki attempted to blast it away, but it managed to avoid it, albeit narrowly. It used Katsuki's body as a puppet once it was completely encircled. Himiko cried out, Katsuki, in fear for her friend who was struggling to escape. Thanks for the body, friend, exclaimed the sludge villain, who was fully in control of Katsuki. Much better than those officers, but they served their use. I'm going to have plenty of fun with you and that quirk is yours. Ha ha ha. When Himiko yelled, get off him, Katsuki's hand was pointing at her. Despite his best efforts, Katsuki was unable to escape. Out of my way, brat. If it weren't for the wood that encased him so quickly, he would have fired at point-blank range. After stopping the attack, Kamui Woods yelled, stand down villain. Himiko got up to approach Katsuki, but she was abruptly lifted up and dragged away by a policeman. The sludge villain managed to get Katsuki's explosion to function just in time, burning through the wood with ease and pushing Kamui back. Katsuki's air supply was cut off entirely as he began to panic, leaving him completely defenseless throughout. No. Katsuki. Katsuki. Ha 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 ha. Come on out, All Might. I got a bargain for you, howled the sludge villain, exploding wherever he felt like it. With Izuku. Izuku simply rushed in their direction when he heard the powerful explosions. No. Those worthless fools. The other heroes who would typically be present would flinch back if this were exactly like the past. He was correct. At least he could comprehend, Kamui. He could have been killed by any of the explosions, so his quirk was useless against them. Too far back, Mount Lady remained in her massive form as others surrounded her. Death Arms is just standing there, fucking. Death Arms responded to the question by saying, there's nothing we can do, we have to wait for a proper hero to come and assist with the situation. He would have continued, but he yelled abruptly, what the kid, get back here. He began to run in, but Izuku was unaware of it. He wasn't shocked, though. Katsuki would not be alright for long enough for All Might to arrive. It was not long before the sludge villain noticed him, and Katsuki followed suit. His mouth was fully covered as he attempted to scream something. As before, Izuku spun around his bag and threw it straight into the villain's eye as he moved his hand to blast him. He has a glaring weakness, but I can't attack just one spot. Izuku hurried forward, thinking. The villain's body was a little out of control as he was preoccupied with his eye. Ignoring the escalating flames and fire around them, he shifted his hand into a motion and lunged forward. He unintentionally released Katsuki's hand while yanking at the villain's eye with a claw-like grip, causing him to scream in agony. Katsuki. Die. Without hesitation, Katsuki blew up the body of the sludge villain. Unable to keep himself upright, he coughed and fell forward after freeing himself. However, as the sludge villain reorganized, Izuku was already reaching behind. The villain yelled, "You little shit. I'm gonna gaga gaga," after being tased. Izuku was expressionless as he saw the villain squirm on the ground before being covered in wood. Kamui exclaimed, "You've been caught, evil doer," as the audience cheered. Izuku chose Katsuki, who was still coughing and struggling to breathe, over them. "You good?" Izuku inquired earnestly. Katsuki was able to escape, saying, "That was the most disgusting thing that has ever happened to me." If Himiko hadn't abruptly embraced him and Izuku, he would have said more. "Fangs? Get off." Both of them stiffened as Himiko cried, Did you have to make me so worried? I thought that you were going to too." Katsuki growled and inhaled. "Well, I didn't. Not at her, least of all, but now was no time to be angry." He gave her a gentle head pat. "I'm fine. Now quit your whining. I'm fine." Izuku confirmed, receiving a feeble nod, "We both are." Himiko hiccuped and gripped them more tightly, saying, "Are right." The idea of losing her brother and friends was too much for Himiko to bear. They took her in. Assisted her. "Mom's so gonna be mad." Izuku stated dryly, "I don't doubt that for a minute." Later, the three had been examined by the on-scene paramedics after the sludge villain had been appropriately taken into custody. Katsuki was the only one who came dangerously close to suffocating, but fortunately, his breathing was fine. Even though he was obviously not in the mood for it, a few heroes were complimenting him on his bravery. They all stepped back when Katsuki said bluntly, "Back off." He turned to his friends after snorting at them and clumsily making excuses to go. "Are we good to go? I already have to buy that shit again for the hag." Izuku said, "I'll help with that if you want." Then he felt a hand touch his shoulder. An agitated Death Arms greeted him as he was roughly turned around. Oh, today was going to be a test of his patience. Death Arms snarled, obviously irritated, "You dumb little bastard. Why did you go running in there? Don't get in the way of the heroes again or else you'll be charged for vigilantism." "I wouldn't have gotten in the way if any of you had done your job." Horrible. That was not what he intended to say aloud. He wasn't expecting it, too, based on his expression. Might as well make it blazing, well into the fire. Wait for another hero. What did you say? I can at least understand Kamui, given he's made of wood, but even he put more effort into helping than you did. Listen here. No, you listen. This guy is my best friend and he was being choked by that villain. Something that you somehow missed despite it happening right in front of you. Izuku intervened, his rage apparent. Death Arms had the audacity to glare more intensely, but when they realized they were beginning to gain some momentum, they gave up. Death Arms said, eliciting a look of utter skepticism, "You could have gotten yourself killed by doing something so stupid. I had the situation completely handled and if you hadn't interfered, your little friend would have been safe. Don't you look at me like that. No normal human can handle those types of explosions your friend was dishing out." Izuku turned away from the stunned hero and walked to his friends, both of them exchanging wide-eyed glances as he said, "And yet, I did. What does that say about you? So, wanna get those groceries?" Katsuki asked. Deku, the fuck was that? They were much more subdued than the other students and even some teachers he was used to talking back to. Izuku shrugged and said, "What? I'm not gonna be judged by that jerk for helping you. Besides, I could have said worse. Like going into detail about he and the others' heroes could have helped you. And you didn't because." Izuku began running at that point, and the others followed suit. "Because I already saved you and left them at the mercy of the reporters. Speaking of, let's dash out of here." "Hey, wait up." They were leaving the scene without realizing that someone was watching them from a distance. Streets, Musudafu, Japan. After putting his phone away, Izuku said, "And, done. Mom's finally calmed down, but we'll be getting an earful when we get home. Though Kyoka and Reiko want to kill us." "The fuck I do," exclaimed Katsuki, who had done the same to his parents. He anticipated being hit and hugged. Himiko bumped Kachan's elbow and exclaimed, "They're just worried, Kachan." He laughed, but he didn't refute it. He grew fond of them, comparing them to mold. Katsuki grunted and fell silent for a minute, saying, "Whatever, I just want today to be done with." He abruptly stopped and gestured to Izuku before they could move on. "Don't think that you'll be saving me again. When Katsuki said, "I got caught off guard, it won't happen again. But next time I ain't gonna have anyone save my ass." His tone was one of resolve. It's 1 year until we can go to UA and I'm only going to get stronger. Not only to become the #1 hero, but the greatest one there ever was. So you better work extra hard to keep up with me, Deku. Kachan. Alright then, I guess I have to up my training a little bit to make sure you don't try and get ahead of me. Izuku laughed. Bullshit, you're ahead of me. Laughing, Katsuki's smile was evident. Himiko shrugged and then burst out laughing, saying, "Boys." They continued to converse and giggle until they eventually began to reach around a corner before. "I am here," exclaimed All Might as he suddenly ran around a corner. "Holy shit, ah." Izuku smiled and waved, "Hey there." He wasn't certain whether All Might would approach him, but it's better to be prepared than afraid. All Might said, "Good to see you again, young Midoriya." As Izuku rubbed his ear. "No need to yell, Yano, I'm right in front of you." "Oh, sorry." When Katsuki and Himiko finally realized who was in front of them, All Might brought it down. Then Himiko said slowly, that's All Might." When Katsuki exclaimed, the #1 hero." All Might grinned at them and said, "Ah. You must be friends with young Midoriya." "Yup, this is my little sister, Himiko Midoriya. And this is my best friend, Katsuki Bakugo." Izuku introduced them to each other. Regaining her composure, Himiko managed to say, It's nice to meet you, sir." All Might, I'm gonna surpass you," Katsuki exclaimed, trembling in place and smiled artificially. "I'll become the #1 hero and show the world how great I am. I'll do it and go beyond you as a hero." Katsuki turned red when Izuku said, "Don't mind him, Kachan's just excited to meet you, that's all." "Shut it," All Might exclaimed, "Hey, I love your attitude, kid. It's good to meet you both." This caused their chest to slightly swell. "I heard about what happened. Forgive me for not being able to be there at the time." In an attempt to appear strong in front of his hero, Katsuki muttered, "I had it handled." Himiko grinned broadly and said, "He saved me from the sludge villain. He's a real hero, that's for sure. Same for my brother. They're the greatest." Katsuki shouted, "Cue quiet fangs." But couldn't help but smile. Izuku patted her head and said, Thanks Himi." The hero was reminded of his own friends and exclaimed, "Ha ha ha. It's great to see such good friends together." Instead, "But there's a reason he came here. I however wished to speak to you, young Midoriya." "About what?" Izuku asked, sensing the direction of this. "To be sure," All Might inquired, "what were you thinking when you ran in there?" Izuku laughed, not missing the look he received from Katsuki. "Honestly, I saw Katsuki being choked and couldn't think of anything else. I didn't even realize I was running in until someone called me out. I guess it just came naturally. I always enjoy helping people, it's why I want to be a hero after all." All Might grinned and relaxed his posture as he continued in a softer tone, saying, "I see. While I normally shouldn't condone such acts, your heroic spirit showed today." All Might asserted, his smile widening as their eyes widened. "There are stories about every hero. How they became great. Most have one thing in common. Their bodies moved before they had a chance to think, almost on their own. And today that's what happened to you. That's why I can proudly say that despite your quirkless nature, you too can become a hero." Even though Izuku had heard it before, what he did made it feel even more powerful. To avoid giving the impression that he was crying, he even had to quickly wipe his eyes. It didn't help at all to know it was coming. Katsuki was grinning at him for it, and he could feel it. He would retaliate against him. Himiko could only smile, undoubtedly pleased to hear All Might of all people praising him. All Might looked at his friends and said, "Now before I continue on, there is something I'd like to tell you about. Privately if you don't mind." Being kept in the dark made Katsuki look like a kicked puppy. "TCH, don't keep us waiting." However, as he and Himiko moved away from them, he forced up a glare. Izuku inquired, "What did you want to talk about?" "Well, I've been at this hero gig for a long time now and I've put in a lot of work and effort to help others. Yet I know one day I must retire and allow for the next generation to take charge in my stead." All Might started as Izuku blinked in disbelief. He always assumed the man would continue until he had no choice but to stop. "With that in mind, it isn't happening anytime soon, but I would like to do it someday. But that's not why I bring this up. You see, my quirk is unlike any other." "Here we go," Izuku pondered. All Might paused for a second before continuing. "My power is known as One for All, and it has been passed down several times before falling into my hands by my master. Which is why I put much thought into this and wanted to give away my power to Samwarthi before my retirement. After hearing your tale and your reasoning of wanting to be a hero, I all might declare you worthy of this power. Do you accept it, young Midoriya? He really needed to consider this, fuck. On the one hand, refusing to accept it would be insane. It was a very strong quirk, and he knew exactly how it operated. Given his extensive training, he wouldn't be shocked if he initially had some control over it. If the vestiges were the same, then don't worry about the additional quirks that came with it. Furthermore, this would probably be his only chance to accept such a wonderful power. On the other hand, the Demon Lord would target All Might if he didn't murder All for One. His League of Villains and himself. Additionally, he had taken great pride in his accomplishments despite not having any quirks. If he accepted the quirk, he would be discarding all of that, wouldn't he? In addition, he could always fulfill his original plan of becoming a quirkless hero. To prove to the world that greatness could be achieved without a superpower. However, was asking for both too much. He could still demonstrate to everyone that a quirk was all that it was. You were a hero because of the way you trained yourself, both mentally and physically. One for All would still not have an advantage in a number of circumstances. To give a surprise, those needed a little more thought and a little extra effort. Even though it was a part of him, One for All did not define his own abilities and qualities. The end result was that it was a quirk. Moreover, what if All for One was alive? Well, he would be prepared. Okay, All Might, I accept. He was going to completely upend this world. The next day, Musudafu, Takoba Municipal Beach Park. A decade before the UA admission test, seated on a bench, Reiko gazed out at the surprisingly bustling beach. Why, since they had previously completed cleaning it, it had returned to the map as a real, everyday beach. He saw surfers, shop owners, couples, children, and everyone else you might think of. But he wasn't here for that reason. He was anticipating the arrival of his friends so they could discuss the specifics of the previous day. Residents of Usajiyama yesterday afternoon. Reiko was enraged. Enraged at his pushy, obnoxious, hero, sister for snatching a quick one over his head. He was a little taller and his hair had grown out a bit, but otherwise he had not changed much. Additionally, Rumi's persistent insistence that he aspire to be a hero had not changed. What then did she do? Apply him as a UA for the hero course. College. He had nothing in mind. One thing, and she was incapable of showing that much respect. Even though he detested her attitude, he didn't hate her directly, and he could feel his blood pressure rising. Why? The answer, however, was straightforward. She cherished him. Like any good sibling, she loved him. But she had very high hopes for him as well. In general, she had thought he might be the next great hero. They were the way they were today because of that kind of thought in her mind. Rumi didn't realize how little interest he had in being a hero, and his social awareness was as low as a brick wall. As a result, he had been compelled to train with her almost daily since he was a young boy. It had begun small, of course, pushing his little body to the limit and never stopping. Ironically, he began his exercise routine. As he grew older, however, Rumi began to coerce him into increasingly vicious and agonizing fights. Some would claim that it was merely sparring or training, but that is untrue. There was always conflict. He had never been close to winning that battle. The criticism was the worst. Every error, every miss, every effort was ridiculed. Without understanding how degrading it was, they were treated like a joke. She would say to be encouraged to be better. So far, they had only done that. He was furious that she was only interested in fighting in the end. Sincerely, he couldn't recall the last time they had an ordinary moment apart from family gatherings. She had taken up time she had used to enjoy with him, so he was truly grateful that she was a hero. Granted, it was worse than normal when she did find time. He was grateful for his friends in part because of it. He was always invited to whatever event they were hosting. An ideal method of avoiding her. You could, of course, ask their parents. Well, that one was on him, to be honest. Even though he detested Rumi's attitude, he still loved her and didn't want their parents to think poorly of her. He thus misrepresented his true feelings. Was it bad for you? Indeed. Was he concerned? Definitely. Was he going to take any action? No. Even though he knew his sister loved him and he ultimately cared for her, this application issue was excessive. Son of a fuck. He turned around and punched his cabinet in, anger striking him like lightning. With a growl, he dragged his fist out and sat down, picking up the phone. Need to get out. Be gone before she has the chance to talk to me about. He paused when he saw a recent news report that showed Izuku racing toward the scene and Katsuki being apprehended by a villain. At this time, being a hero was something Reiko detested. They consistently gave the impression that it was more of a job than a real duty. Some people would even treat it like a celebrity. His sister merely took pleasure in the fight. Not all of them were like that. All Might and his aspirational friends are a good example. He had no doubt that they would excel in their position. He never, ever considered becoming one. Until yesterday, when he saw the news. While other heroes were either unable to help or chose to wait around, his tenacious, quirky best friend had rescued his other friend from a villain. Without a thought, he moved on his own. He only cared about his friend, and he detested how inspirational that was. He wasn't seeking notoriety or wealth. When it came to his perspective on heroism, it had truly affected him. Why couldn't you just be a regular person for once, Midoriya? Damn you. The save overwhelmed his rage at his sister, leaving him completely bewildered. Am I really thinking about this? Quote. His thoughts were interrupted when he saw Kyoka. Yo, Bun. She had undergone her own transformation. Even though her hair was still short, there was now a white dyed patch on top of her head. He wouldn't dare say it, but she was also much more flexible now. He and his ears were frightened by those jacks. So what's our plan? Then Reiko asked, plan. Mostly referring to Izuku, punishment for those knuckleheads. As they waited for their friends to arrive, Kyoka agreed, oh right. You jack an arm, I'll punch it. Still, Midoriya sounded excited for us to come here today. Any idea why? Kyoka shrugged, saying, no clue. Maybe he got an autograph from All Might. He was in the area. Reiko, who was prepared to kick Izuku's head if that were the case, muttered, tch. That better not be it. Jiro, Reiko, they exclaimed as they turned to see Izuku grinning broadly and waving at them. Katsuki was standing next to him, his face unreadable. At last, a tall, muscular man was standing behind them, attempting to conceal his face with a heavy coat. For starters, I'm sorry for what happened. I wasn't thinking at the time and just ran in. Kyoka took a chance and gave Izuku a quick jab on the arm, saying, don't worry, you're forgiven. Not. Reiko punched the spot after she withdrew, causing him to wince and retreat. They smirked as Izuku pouted at them, saying, ow. Katsuki snorted until he was slapped over his head, saying, ha. Nerd. The fuck hair. Reiko made fun of Katsuki's expression by saying, that was making us worry, dumbass. If it weren't for the tall figure behind them laughing, they would have begun their planned argument. As he commanded their attention, the man exclaimed, ha ha ha. You have quite the friend dynamic. It's great to see how much they care for you. Kyoka questioned, irritated by the loud voice, and who's this? Izuku pulled out a notebook and handed it to her, saying, I'll give you a hint. When she saw it, she blinked alongside Reiko. As they gazed up at the towering figure, their eyes gradually widened. Do you need another hint or? Wondering how that had happened, Kyoka squeaked, All Might, you got All Might here. Yup. Reiko asked incredulously, how? They jumped when All Might interrupted, it was quite a tale. However, we haven't got time to waste. There's a lot to discuss after all. Reiko questioned, perplexed, what could be so important that you felt the need to include us? With a frown and a deliberate thumb poke in the greenette's face, Katsuki declared, Deku here is becoming All Might's successor. Gay. Later, All Might told their friends, and that is why I've decided to give young Midoriya here my quirk. There was a very remote spot on the beach where they were watching to make sure no one was listening. After All Might had come out, he told the story of what had happened and how he felt about retiring someday, which brought us to this moment. Reiko asked, checking her surroundings. I wasn't drugged, was I? He could only moan when he saw the head tremble. Okay. This is my life now. Trying to maintain her composure, Kyoka remarked, a quirk that can be transferred, that's so crazy, but neither of you are lying. Seriously, did you have to drop this on us after the whole sludge villain thing? Since it was a late quirk awakening, he really couldn't have explained, sorry. I didn't want to keep any of this hidden from you guys. I mean, I have been quirkless the entire time. Not with their familiarity with them. Plus, it's not like I could keep this from you anyway. You're all my friends. Unable to fault that, Kyoka huffed, well yeah, okay. If he did, they would most likely harm him for attempting to conceal it. But still, that's amazing. And you're the eighth? Reiko inquired, turning to face All Might, who grinned and nodded. How the heck does this even become a thing? His smile had become a little more forced, and All Might had visibly stiffened. Forgive me, young Usajiyama. Reiko. All Might corrected himself, young Reiko. That is a very long and difficult tale for me at this time. Just know that there was a good reason for it at the time. However, giving this quirk to young Mirodia has nothing to do with that. All Might seemed a little tense at that before he suddenly brightened up. Have no fear, however. My goal is to support young Midoriya as he pursues his heroic dreams. Quote. All Might abruptly fell silent as Izuku reprimanded them, saying, better keep it down, unless you want a horde of fangirls and fanboys to notice you. And this isn't some nonsense plan? Reiko inquired, oblivious to the glances he got. You say what the fuck? Katsuki snarled, referring to this as his idol. Regardless of Katsuki's behavior, Reiko sneered, I wouldn't be surprised if this was just some sort of joke or something like that. Excuse me for being skeptical about this whole quirk transfer thing. All Might is this. Without the least doubt, Katsuki uttered, you really think he's like those asshats from our school? I'm ensuring that my friend isn't being taken advantage of. Reiko glared and said, because if he is, then I might be going on the record for beating the shit out of the #1 hero. All Might met his gaze and was unable to back down from the threat. Then he grinned. All Might's voice was startlingly normal as he said, hey, you have good friends. All right, Izuku smiled. You have nothing to be afraid of, but I can appreciate your concern. All Might put an elbow on Izuku's head and smiled normally, saying, helps there were kindred spirits in a way. Upon my name, I assure you that my only intent is to help him achieve his goal as a hero. What? Quote. All Might laughed, shocking the majority of them. Well, I was quirkless as well before my master passed on one for all to me. Kyoka, Reiko inquired, just to be certain. Still in shock, she confirmed, he hasn't lied yet. Who would have guessed that the world's most powerful hero was once quirkless? Katsuki growled, receiving a scoff in return, told you. Instead of being ignored, Katsuki turned to Izuku and said, piss off, Bomberanian. So this means you can punch the weather now. Quote. They were confused when Izuku said, not yet, I haven't accepted it just yet. What? Why not? It didn't take long for it to click, Kyoka said as Reiko glanced between him and All Might. Body mass. Reiko abruptly mentioned, the power of one for all would be too much because their bodies are so drastically different. Considering how strong All Might has grown over time, it could make you feel ill. Izuku put the bloody image in their minds and said, pop. Pop. The sight made them all shudder. You must therefore become as jacked as All Might. That is not a good look. Kyoka asked in disbelief, shivering as she pictured his oddball face on All Might's body. Izuku interrupted, not pleased with the imagery, and said, no, not really. Even at this moment, I'm more than confident that I can handle it right now. But I also wouldn't be able to use that power in its entirety. The idea is that I build up enough muscle to be able to use more than 1%. Additionally, it will make it easier for One for All to adjust to my body. In addition, One for All did change when it was transferred to him, but none of them knew that, not even All Might. Full cowling and the additional vestiges quirks were evidence of that, just to give him more control over power when the time came. Yes, I am more than sure he can handle this power as is, but having access to more so right off the bat is also a grand plan. All Might boomed, reminding them of his natural volume. That's why I thought of this. His book, The American Dream Plan, by All Might, was mentioned. I personally created a training program for young Midoriya to follow in order to get him ready for Plus Ultra as well as to gain muscle. Quote. All right, when will he truly receive One for All? Reiko rolled his eyes at the name and asked. The entrance exam is 1 month away. In this manner, he will have enough time to claim that quirk as his own. All Might said. Is that sufficient time? Not sure if it was that simple, Kyoka inquired. But naturally, ultimately, all I have to do to use it is clench my ass cheeks and yell, smash, to finish the task at hand, All Might explained dryly. Katsuki whispered, clench your ass cheeks. And shout, smash, Kyoka continued. Exactly, All Might exclaimed with pride, even striking a pose. Everyone but Izuku and All Might exclaimed in complete confusion, oh my gosh, he's a dork. Izuku couldn't help but laugh uncontrollably, and All Might gasped. After they had calmed down, they resumed their conversation. Anyway, if young Midoriya hadn't suggested that you all train with him, you would all be missing out on time as he will be training hard over the next few months. Even though he was a little perplexed by their abrupt shiver, All Might laughed when he saw their faces. He was very insistent about telling you. I wanted to include your own training regimens because I didn't see any reason not to. He didn't know why, but he wanted to control it. The devil, they knew. As if they were actually saying it now, Izuku added, but you don't have to join obviously. I know this is more or less a me thing, so I can always go at it myself. TCH. Give up the opportunity to train with All Might. Only a fool would decline that offer. He glanced at the two who had not yet raised their voices. It wouldn't hurt at all. Kyoka, trying to look cool, twirled her earjack around and said, that only leaves Reiko. I'm trying to become a hero too, you know. Izuku gave him a simple way out by saying, if you don't want to, I'd understand, ya know. Reiko actually considered what he would say at that moment, knowing it would have a significant impact on his future, and he thought about Rumi. His anger came quickly, but it vanished as soon as he thought of his friends. TCH. The truth is, screw it. Before abruptly adding, the hero course doesn't sound that bad, I guess, Reiko said, I'll give it a shot. Are you planning to enroll in the hero course? Izuku asked, expressing their perplexity. What was altered? Concerned, Kyoka inquired, what changed? They had all heard about his relationship with Rumi being tough and the fact that he had long put off the idea of being a hero. Reiko chose to stop there because he needed to pass it off and this mushy stuff wasn't his style. I guess, I felt a little inspired, that's all. So what's first on the hell training? Quote. Hell instruction. I am overthinking it. Young Midoriya is nothing like him. Right. All Might asked, feeling a familiar chill when he saw his chosen successor smile like an old teacher of his. He actually had to slap his leg for a moment because it was shaking. He would get it. How did your mother react to this? You told her, correct? Kyoka inquired as All Might and Izuku turned to face one another. The day before Midoriya household, Izuku told his mother, as best he could, and that's the story. As she sat there in silence, Inko could only blink, multiple times, actually. Is she all right? All Might asked out of concern. However, as he turned to his student and his sister dressed in raincoats. Wah! My baby boy! Inko burst into tears, destroying All Might in the process and drowning the apartment. At this time, knowing that they would have a lengthy conversation once they got home, Izuku replied, yeah, she took it pretty well. After 3 months Musudafu, Takoba Municipal Beach Park. The UA entrance exam is 7 months away. He had a strong quirk, a sharp mind, and a vast skill set that was beyond their combined capabilities. People had told Katsuki since he was a young child that he was awesome, but instead of becoming conceited as he would have, he became more assured of his quirk and all that he was capable of. He had a good family, devoted friends, and his best friend was the most fierce rival. Nevertheless, he was still unable to conceal his jealousy. Deku had saved him, and he was thankful for that, but a tiny part of him had wished that their roles had been reversed, that he would have been the one who had truly proven himself as true hero material in that moment. All Might, his idol, had essentially chosen his rival to inherit a quirk of legacy, which had made him angry, to be honest. It didn't help with the reason for the choice, which was ironically his capture against the sludge villain. Even though he would have loved to be deserving of one for all, he knew that his friend had earned it, and he remembered scolding himself for thinking that stupid thought because he wanted to look good in front of his idol. Deku had been determined to become a hero since they were toddlers. He had studied, planned, and trained, and the only thing that had separated them was that he had a powerful quirk while he had no, but that had never bothered him. Instead, it had motivated him to work even harder toward their shared goal of becoming heroes. For this reason, he was currently face down in cement. Weighted running, hours of sparring, and even some aggressive weight training were all part of All Might's training, which combined with Izuku's add-ons, had given their bodies a harsh feeling. As usual, though, Izuku had a tendency to overdo it, to the fullest extent possible. Katsuki stood over him and said bluntly, you overdid it, again. It was almost nighttime, and everyone was supposed to take a day off, but his best friend's idiot had chosen to train all day instead, which had only made his body give into the pain. Izuku laughed in between breaths, and Katsuki could only roll his eyes before he took Izuku by the arm and walked him to a bench. "Lost. My second wind," he said. He had dropped the grenade on the bench without any fanfare, and the woman moaned as it hit the floor. "You better fucking shower when you get home. You smell like shit." Izuku remained motionless, breathing. "I will, as soon as I can, move my legs." Katsuki sighed and took a seat beside his opponent, and they sat quietly for a while, relishing their solitude. "What brought you out here?" He knew by now his friend's character and his harsh methods for himself, so he said, "Your fault for being predictable." "Really, what were you thinking?" When the time came, Izuku readily disclosed, "That I need to catch up. There's so much more I have to learn when it comes down to it," he said. They all knew that we weren't even at the starting line yet. "More than that, I don't want to be held back by anything when I do accept All Might's quirk," they said. "And you believe it's a good idea to burn yourself out?" Izuku laughed and said, "Well, yeah, no, I ain't got an argument for that." With a frustrated sigh, Katsuki said, "Dumbass, you're gonna do fine. I am aware of it." Izuku always seemed to be planning ahead, but he never told Katsuki what. It wasn't serious. He would tell him if he was ever doing poorly, emotionally or otherwise. "But I'll be ready, we all will be." Katsuki knew that Izuku had a lot on his mind. "Hey, I was prepared from birth. It doesn't mean a damn thing to me that you have All Might's quirk," Katsuki said, laughing and grinning at him like a savage. "I'm going to be the #1 hero and kick your ass no matter what you get." Izuku got a deadpan look when he said, "Oh hey, you updated your catchphrase." He then got a slap across the head, which caused him to yell, "Ow." "For what purpose was that?" "What else is it for talking shit?" Katsuki snorted, turning his head away from the laughter. "You're mean." He was jealous of the nerd, to think. Takoba Municipal Beach Park, Musudafu, 2 months later. The entrance exam is 5 months away. When Kyoka was a teenager, she didn't think much of herself. She had an above-average quirk. She didn't think she was attractive, and her attitude made her difficult to get along with. She had wanted to be both a hero and a musical, combining the two, but she wasn't always sure about either at the time. Then one day, Living Broccoli, also known as Izuku Midoriya, came to her rescue. What could one say about him? Well, he was crazy for one thing, not because he wanted to be a hero, but because of the way he worked for it, pushing himself to the limit and believing in boundaries, but also because he was determined to break them by any means necessary. He demonstrated this at almost every opportunity they had, whether it was through education, physical training, or even the most basic game, something he shared with Reiko. Though it was just a casual conversation, he had made it feel so special, and it only grew stronger as they shared their passions for becoming heroes. His determination was contagious, and it helped when he personally dissected and rebuilt her quirk, which wasn't nearly as average as she had thought. Her quirk could be quite destructive if they got their hands on the right equipment, but that was for another time. It was a lot, no doubt, but she couldn't help but appreciate it all at the same time. Heck, she had good friends who weren't just people she hardly spoke to. They were real, strong, and honest friends. This one guy had greatly encouraged her to take her own goals seriously, both by actually writing down and singing out her songs and by joining him and their friends on the grueling training seasons. Even though she didn't anticipate receiving a crew, her thoughts were disrupted by a punch to the face, and she landed on her back with a groan and a hand on her cheek. "Jiro, Kyoka." Izuku knelt down next to her, a worried look clear on his face. "Are you okay?" Kyoka nodded and sat up slightly, saying, "I'm fine." "But you're not." Without giving him a chance, she kicked him in the side, knocking him off balance, then kicked under his feet with her other leg and swiftly pinned him back to the ground, her jacks aimed at his neck. "Finally, my victory." "Yeah, you won. Now get off me," Izuku said, looking away awkwardly. She blushed upon realizing their position and quickly got off of him. They sat up, looking at each other for a moment before laughing awkwardly. A few minutes later they were sitting by the beach, near the coast while enjoying a cold drink. "Phew, that was exactly right. I'm not joking, but I was surprised because I thought you were a machine underneath all that skin." "Even so, you hit pretty damn hard," Kyoka said, finishing her own drink. She moaned in agreement as Izuku clarified, "Sorry, but it's not like villains won't use everything they have." She could agree with him entirely, so it's not like he didn't have a point. "But I can tone it down if you like." Izuku nodded in approval, which caused Kyoka to smile a little. But do you think I improved enough? Kyoka sighed. No, the last thing I need is to get screwed because I didn't take my training seriously. The UA is ultimately for the best. You'll blend in perfectly then. The benefit of having a hearing quirk is that she can always tell when he is lying. Same as the rest of us, Izuku said as casually as ever, but he still meant it. Looking sideways, Kyoka acknowledged, that's good, though. I could use some extra help studying for the written portion. She could perform much better on those practice exams, and there was no reason to take that chance. We might have to adjust the schedule a little bit, but I think it's something we should do. Izuku said with a sigh. Not like we shouldn't make sure that we missed something there. Alright, how about this weekend? Quote, yeah, but I think it's gonna be us. What? Quote, Katsuki and his parents are going rock climbing at Mount Ogawayama, and Reiko is also going to see his parents. Without observing Kyoka's expression, Izuku explained simply, even All Might has a patrol to do, so it'll just be us. Alone, with him? She asked. When was the last time you were alone with him? Never. It didn't help that the thought made her face flush a little, let alone her heartbeat. Was this the wrong time to bring up the crush? No, she did, and for years, in fact. Sure, she initially brushed it off, thinking that they were just starting out as friends and that there was always time to stop being so close, but it didn't, and they only grew closer. She didn't just think about how kind and determined he was in passing, she had truly fallen for Izuku for who he was. Then, of course, there was the fear of rejection and awkward situations, even if she knew, he wouldn't let their friendship end. But she never did act on those feelings, and she definitely wasn't going to now, when they had to concentrate on getting into UA first. After all, they were trying to become heroes. Perhaps she would tell him when they were finally at the university. So my place or you? She would die of embarrassment. Definitely your place. She couldn't possibly handle her parents, especially her father, who discovered her in a week and has been attempting to get her to impress her friends. Besides, I recall missing out on some baby pictures of yours. I'm proud of those photos, don't you know that? Quote. I was talking about the Bomberanian. Oh, I see, it makes sense. Yes, the copies are still with us. Kyoka was limited to humming and decided to savor the present. Perhaps. No, it would develop later. Takoba Municipal Beach Park, Musudafu, 4 months later. The UA entrance exam is in a month. Even though it was still early in the morning, Izuku and All Might stood in front of each other, thinking only, it's time. They couldn't wait any longer. All Might said, you've grown, young Midoriya. His tone had temporarily calmed down, probably from just waking up. With your current state of mind and body, you were already poised to become a hero. But now, even if the changes aren't visible, I can tell by looking at you that you've crossed the line. One for all is something you are more than ready for. With a knowing laugh, Izuku said, I have you and everyone else to thank for. He couldn't say that he would have preferred to tackle this alone, unlike many heroes, even though he knew he had worked hard to get here. You should also feel proud of yourself. After all, you worked hard, I'm just the trainer and provider. However, that also applies to your friends. All Might grinned, undoubtedly pleased with both his own and his friends' accomplishments. Now then. Wait a minute, quote, yeah, quote. Izuku scratched his cheek, perplexing All Might, and said, I've been meaning to ask this for a while, but I never found the time and with how awkward it feels. What's your name? Quote. Oh, my name, Yagi Toshinori. All Might grasped, extending his hand. Quote. They let go as Toshinori struck a pose. Izuku Midoriya. Izuku met his hand, moaning in his head over how long that took. Are you prepared to inherit one for all now? With a somewhat forced smile, Toshi said. Oh, this section, yes. Then, he pulled a bottle of water out of thin air and held them out to him, casually plucking a long hair from his head. Eat this, quote. This was not going to be enjoyable. Later. You consumed his hair. With a disbelieving glance between them, Katsuki asked. Reiko shared his astonishment and shook his head, saying, I knew you were a fanboy, but come on. I'm going to kick you if this doesn't work. Kyoka glared at All Might and said, right in the balls. It was amusing to watch the number 1 hero duck behind him, but that was sufficient. Okay, I consumed his hair. That being said, if this doesn't work, we can all take turns kicking him in the balls, they said, based on the increasing disgusted expression. It was pretty much the least nastiest way to transfer the quirk. Young Midoriya wa. Toshi's voice was one of betrayal. As Toshi retreated into hiding, Reiko said, I'm down for that. Will you please use it right away? Katsuki said impatiently, I want to see if this is something I'm going to be working harder against. Oh no, does anyone feel in danger? Reiko asked. You say what the fuck? Katsuki snarled. Enough you two. Izuku sighed and said, I believe there has been enough time for it to process. He looked at them incredulously and said, so, I'm going to go punch the ocean. What? Did you anticipate that I would hit something for which I would be liable? Quote. After all, is he unable to cover any property damage? Reiko gestured to All Might with his thumb. Piggy bank is not me. He certainly didn't have a luxurious home that was fully equipped with everything he could possibly need, and he could have retired here and now, leading a comfortable life until he died of old age. Nope, not at all. Anyway, Izuku said, stand by and get ready to be amazed. He approached the shore, gazed out at it, closed his eyes, and inhaled deeply before saying, okay, one for all. Let's start. He felt nothing at first, as was to be expected, but then something stirred, a flicker of something strange, almost like awakening, and he concentrated only on that sensation, trying to absorb it as fully as possible. And boy did he, as he felt it come forth in full, causing his eyes to snap open, similar in green, his veins to turn a noticeable red, and his fist to clench and rear back. Even behind him, a huge gust of wind had formed, blowing past them all as they shielded their eyes from it. When it had finally settled, the group had turned to face Izuku and the damage done. There was now a noticeable dent in the sand where Izuku stood, and the ocean was still attempting to refill itself. He punched forward, and the sand exploded around him as it split and shot everywhere. Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! When Toshi saw the power display, he yelled. Wow, that was awesome! Katsuki shook in place and yelled, totally out of character. Oh fuck, son! Reiko screamed in a sudden panic. Oh my god, what are you? Izuku. Izuku was ahead of them, standing motionless with part of his shirt gone, but his entire left arm was broken, bruised black and purple, and completely limp. Kyoka screamed, her hands to her mouth. Izuku was trembling and shaking in place, probably from the pain. Was it insufficient? Reiko growled in annoyance. It was the whole point of waiting so long, and yet the best they were able to do was make sure he didn't explode. However, just as he was about to rush over, he saw that Izuku's veins were still glowing red. Quote. Young Midoriya, now turn off one for all. Toshi yelled in a panic as he stepped forward. However, the trembling form of Izuku merely waved him off, baffling him. Wah! Katsuki, who appeared surprised by the broken arm as well, but dared not interrupt, growled, leave him. Come on you fucking nerd. Figure this shit out. They were startled by Izuku's declaration, but he didn't care because he clung to the sensation. I know exactly how you feel now and I don't plan to let go just yet. Izuku said, chuckling abruptly and clenching his free hand tightly. Quote. In order to properly control it, he had concentrated only on that feeling, that power. Ultimately, power such as this worked in conjunction with focus and meditation. Recalling the explanations of concepts like ki and life energy, he applied those same principles to the process of locating and controlling the power of one for all, and once he had done so, it was important to follow it through him at the lowest percentage possible. And, well, he did precisely that. He threw his free fist towards the ocean, only to cause a huge circle of wind to fly through the sea and slightly party it, but his arm remained broken as he looked down at it and breathed slightly. His hair had flowed upward a little as green electricity appeared around him, and the red in his veins had disappeared, while his eyes had shimmered into a brilliant emerald color. Everyone gets a full cowling. Izuku firmly declared, you're mine. He laughed and threw his fist into the air, his eyes momentarily turning yellow. Everyone rushed over to check on him as he withered in agony, saying various things, but mostly they were just glad to see him alive. He then fell on his back, full cowling deactivating as he lay there moaning in pain. Now, there was just a month left before they would set out on their adventure. Into turning into heroes.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, bye bye.